6:33. Sorry for a few minutes late start. We are all rushing up here with lots of stuff. I do want to recognize our fine arts performers. We had the CPS 5th grade honors choir come and entertain us before the meeting. We had, I'll just read first names: Abel, Ariana, Aiden, Barima, Carlan, Charlotte, Clara, another Clara, Dominique, Elise, Fanon, Felix, Finn, Jacob, Josephine, Katerina, King, Kinley, Layla, Lily, Maya, Malia, Micah, McKenna, Shauna, Sutton, Sydney, and Will. Well done, CPS 5th grade honors choir. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as written.
Second.
All in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. I will have the reading of the equity statement by Mr. Harper this month.
Oh, sorry. Columbia Schools, through action in partnership with families and community, will uphold the values, policies, and practices that promote cultural competence. We will accept, embrace, and empower students and staff in their individual identities and to establish and sustain human dignity, justice, and equitable treatment and inclusiveness in the classroom and workplace.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. And now we'll have a special recognition with Dr. Porter.
Good evening. First, I'd like to recognize Jason Stephen and Ben Stephen and their coach, Julia Dunn. Ben and Jason have both graduated from us, but we want to recognize them and their amazing achievements. Jason and Ben achieved National Gold Medal and National Silver Medal recognition, respectively, through the 2023 Scholastic Awards Program. In this program, 260,000 works of art and writing are submitted and assessed by leading figures in literary and visual arts. The evaluation criteria includes excellence in originality, technical proficiency, and the development of a distinctive personal voice or vision. The prestigious awards ceremony took place at Carnegie Hall in New York City in June 2023. Jason is now in California at CalArts for character animation, and Ben is in Detroit, Michigan at College for Creative Studies, studying concept design. Please help me recognize Jason and Ben Stephen. I'd now like to recognize and bring up Michael McGinty, who is the athletic director at Rockbridge High School.
Good evening. My name is Michael McGinney. I serve as Director of Athletics at Rockbridge High School. First, I want to thank Dr. Porter, and Dr. Yearwood, and all the members of the board for inviting us here to celebrate excellence in the field of athletics. I'm humbled. We have a lot of celebrating to do at Rockbridge this fall, and I'm always humbled. This is one of the coolest things about my job, is to celebrate kids and their accomplishments. I end all my social media posts with the hashtag #RepRockbridge. I like it because it's very general. You can represent Rockbridge in a lot of ways. But truly, these kids here tonight, they don't just represent Rockbridge, they represent themselves, their families, their coaches, their programs, and their example renews continually my belief in the power of sport. On Saturday, so this is Trey Clervey. On Saturday, November 11th, Trey Clervey of Rockbridge High School won the individual state championship in the 100-meter breaststroke at the Misha Class 2 Boys Swim Dive State Championship meet in St. Peters. Trey swam the event in 55.98 seconds. If that sounds fast, it's because it is. And it set a new Rockbridge school record in the 100-meter breaststroke. Yeah, that's right. So I want to congratulate Trey. His family's here with us. I want to thank Coach Biersa for her continued leadership in creating an incredible culture within our Como swim teams. please join me again in celebrating Trey, Coach Biersa, and the swim program on this incredible accomplishment. State champion, Trey Clervy. I think you go this way. Yep. Nope. Everybody, come on. Congrats again, Trey. So you've got here before you now members of the boys cross country team. I'll get to the team and their accomplishments in just a second. But first I need Luke. Luke Sievers, where are you at? Come here, Luke. You're in the limelight here. So 1 week before Trey Clervy was setting the school record in the 100-meter breaststroke, 1 week earlier, we had another Rockbridge student athlete setting records on Saturday, November 4th at Gans Creek here in Columbia in what was an absolutely incredible finish. Corner me sometime and I'll tell you about this race. Luke Sievers won the Misha Cross Country Class 5 Individual State Championship with a time of 14 minutes, 51.9 seconds. This time set a new course record at Gans Creek. Please join me in celebrating Luke Sievers, your state champion Class 5 individual cross country runner. Okay, as Luke was setting the course record, his teammates were busy as well. I want to recognize Andrew Hauser, of course Luke, Matthew Kim, Ethan Hockman, Cook Hudson, Jack Tiemeyer, AJ Bear, Colton Hewlin, Tanner Neal, and Noah Canlis. All these guys competed against one another all year. I watched it. Pushed each other. Each played a pivotal role as they captured the third state championship in cross country in Rockbridge school history as a team. With just one senior, 3 juniors, and 3 sophomores in our state lineup, we were the youngest team at the state meet. This team went on to be not only state champions, but nationally ranked, ranking in the top 25 nationally. They were also a high ranking in the Midwest rankings, making it to the top 5. Just absolutely incredible. The team is coached by Missouri Hall of Famer, that's right, and someone who's meant a great deal not only to cross country and our track programs, but to Rockbridge High School and myself, Coach Neil Blackburn. Please join me in recognizing Coach Blackburn, this incredible team on their third state championship in school history. Thank you, guys.
It's now my honor to welcome to the podium Jennifer Maddox, our Director of Nursing.
Good evening. It is my honor to recognize Rachel Willenberg for being the first nationally certified school nurse within Columbia Public Schools. Nursing certification highlights a nurse's expertise in their specific field and provides evidence of a nurse's knowledge, professionalism, and commitment to furthering their practice. School nurse certifications requires expert knowledge in health appraisal, nurse management, health promotion, disease prevention, and special health issues for students aged 3 to 21. To achieve the certification, a nurse is required to have a bachelor's degree or higher in nursing, be licensed as a registered nurse, have worked a minimum of 1,000 hours as a school nurse, and I will say Rachel has worked over 20,000 hours over the past 16 years, and they must pass the National Certification Examination for School Nurses. To prepare for this 200-question exam, Rachel attended a certification review class. She studied 1 to 2 hours per night for months and completed online practice tests. In addition, Rachel must maintain this distinction by being required to recertify every 5 years. And this recertification requires, again, an RN license, a minimum of 2,000 hours of school nurse work within the past 5 years, 75 continuing education credits, and of course, a recertification fee. Congratulations, Rachel, on this impressive accomplishment.
We're excited to have another month of celebrating our amazing educators in Columbia Public Schools. We have put schools on a rotation for board meetings so that we might have the opportunity to recognize all of our schools and teachers this year. Teachers here tonight represent the best of the best. They are excellent instructors, build strong scholar relationships, and support their schools, colleagues, and administration in numerous ways. We are proud to introduce our Teachers of the Month to you tonight. First, we have Mackenzie Warman from Grant Elementary. Sarah Maddox, New Haven Elementary. Jennifer Tharp, Shepherd Boulevard Elementary. Amy Carso, Gentry Middle School. And Kathy Farrell, Lang Middle School. Congrats to our amazing teachers.
And now we'll hear from Dr. Holtz, who's going to tell us about our substitute of the month.
Good evening, President Waters, Board of Education, and Superintendent Yearwood. EduStaff and Columbia Public Schools are excited to recognize our EduStaff substitutes each month at the board meetings. Our substitutes are so important to the operation of our district. We wanted to thank and honor these individuals that help support our teachers and scholars. CPS employees nominate EduStaff substitutes. These nominations are reviewed, and 2 substitutes are selected to be recognized. For the month of November, I would like to recognize the following individuals. Unfortunately, both were unable to attend, but we have Carissa Keaty here from EduStaff to accept on their behalf. The first is Kristen Anderson. Kristen joined the EduStaff team this year and has made a tremendous impact already. She was nominated by Gina Lee Alexander and Stephanie Stetzler, secretaries at Grant Elementary, for stepping in immediately upon arrival on her first day as a newly assigned building substitute to take on a long-term assignment to support a first grade class who had just lost their teacher. She loved them, worked with them, and strove every day to make their first grade experience as wonderful as possible. She's been with them every day since that terrible, sad day in August, and our whole school is externally grateful to her for it. A truly caring teacher who works hard for their students, Kristen has risen to the challenge above and beyond what could be expected and is seen as truly a Grant all-star. The second is Keith Martinez. Keith joined the EduStaff team in Columbia in the fall of 2019 and has continued to serve throughout the district since. During October, he served in 9 different elementary schools and filled in for teachers near daily. He was nominated by Stephanie Ahrens, the principal secretary at 2 Mile Prairie, for not only being a familiar face at 2 Mile, but someone students are excited to have in their classroom. Mr. Martinez has served with professionalism and empathy while being willing to fill in last minute when changes come up and is seen as part of the 2 Mile Prairie family. With the feedback we've received over the years, it is no doubt many of our schools see him as part of their family too. We are thankful for the contributions of these substitutes as they have exemplified excellence in Columbia Public Schools. Congratulations.
Thank you to all of our outstanding substitutes and teachers and students and coaches and administrators and everyone that kind of keeps all of these clock parts ticking to make this whole thing work. We appreciate all of you. Moving on to public comment, we will hear first from Kenneth Storla, who will be giving comment about safety and security. Hang on, Noelle has to get the timer ready. It's all right.
Greetings and thanks. I'm Ken Storla, and I've been an employee for the past 5 years, and that was my daughter, 5-year-old Jersey. She goes to work with me and has walked over for preschool. She was almost a witness to her daddy being carried out in an ambulance if it had been any other day. Neither of us want to be here tonight, but I certainly didn't show up to work last week wanting to be carried out in a stretcher. And I'm here tonight to implore and beg you to partner with us so it's not my daughter the next time. I'm just one speaker, and for every one of me, there are 20 who are too afraid to speak or simply resolve to leave. I came to Lang after being invited to work with our most at-risk students when I did my specialist degree on thesis on CPS boundaries. I have been a science teacher for most of that time, but took on the industrial tech role this year because no one else could or would fill the position, and our students deserved a competent instructor. I am here to describe my experience working with at-risk scholars at Lang that has taken an emotional toll and now physical toll on my body and mind. I've sat with teachers sobbing in their cars before work because they know what we're going to go in and face. I have seen teachers have to leave midday and get mental health treatment while covering multiple classes at once. And at the end of the day, the only thing that gets us through is leaning on each other and knowing that our students need us. I have watched some of the best educators I have ever known leave because they are simply overwhelmed. Today I watched in abject horror knowing I wouldn't be allowed to intervene due to medical restrictions when 2 students got physical with each other, and it's made me sick all day. I ask for help. We cannot let these children slip through the cracks of a broken system. I want to make crystal clear that we are not advocating for kicking these kids out of school. That isn't who we are as a community. And we are not saying that the administration and the board hasn't done anything. You have, and we've noticed. But our problems are bigger than the supports currently in place, and we are drowning. It's not even Christmas break, and 5 of our teachers have submitted letters of resignation that they won't be back next year. And while they might not tell you that it's the lack of behavior supports, they certainly tell us in the break room. We need a robust action plan that involves helping our scholars succeed by making an environment that is first and foremost safe. How do we do this? We've got to follow the district discipline matrix that isn't currently being utilized even remotely. Discipline referrals for serious offenses cannot be returned undealt with. We have to not give in to the soft bigotry of low expectations and hold our students to a higher standard. We need to use our ISS and student support rooms without fear of consequence and with extreme fidelity, and desperately we need a resource officer to foster a culture of learning and love instead of violence and fear. Again, I didn't want to be here tonight, and I thank you for your time. Please send us the resources our community needs right now. Our kids are watching us. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Nathan Kemp, but I want to remind the audience that there is not to be any disruption during public comment, just in the interest of fairness to all speakers. Nathan Kemp is going to be giving comment about safety and security. It appears Mr. Kemp might not. We'll go to our next speaker, and if Mr. Kemp walks in, then we will hear from him afterwards. We'll third hear from Teresa Gooch, who is going to be giving comment about bullying and safety for coaches.
Good evening. My name is Teresa, and I'm the proud parent of Hickman Cupies. I could speak with you about the need for more trash cans in our parking lots, or the need for to address security concerns, about the gap between the Fine Arts Building and the main building, or any number of practical issues that could easily be solved. But tonight, I simply need to bring an important matter to your attention. I think there's a toxic culture surrounding our CPS sports. This fall, my son played football. You may know that our season was not solid in terms of wins. But as a former high school and collegiate athlete, I'm a firm believer that the lessons of sports go far beyond wins and losses. It was a challenge to go 0-10, but not nearly as challenging as watching parents refuse to cheer for players. In fact, when Dr. Yearwood attended a game, I listened as a parent told him, "I'm glad you're here. You can see how terrible the coaching is." I should have stepped up to say, "Welcome, and keep your eye on 15 because he's a beast." Or watch number 9 because you won't believe his power on a kickoff return. I should have stepped up when parents called our AD names or confronted him at the game in front of his family. I should have stepped up when a parent made a threat that banned us from sitting behind our team. I should have stepped up, but I didn't. And so I'm here tonight to step up for our coaches. This isn't limited to QP football. It's across the district, across sports. It's a nationwide epidemic. Softball, volleyball, baseball, basketball. Few coaches don't have a story about a culture of hateful emails. Parents who refuse to support reasonable team expectations and instead tell hardworking coaches that they doubt their concern for athletes. Parents who play in meetings when they don't like the outcomes. Organize committees when kids don't get enough playing time. Who publicly question the character of our coaches. Parents who trash talk, sowing seeds of dissent, creating more drama than an episode of Real Housewives. Parents who neglect to nurture the skills that our athletes need to compete and succeed past high school, whether athletically or academically. Accountability, dedication, and perseverance. I know this solution isn't simple, and I'm keenly aware that it's not the board's specific task. But someone once told me that public comment is a matter of public record, so I just had to step up and say out loud that our coaches, who average pay somewhere between 16 cents and $1 an hour for their time commitments to our kids, deserve strong communities around them. Communities that are committed to the goal of athletic education, as my athletic director so gracefully states. And to remind us that while everything is permissible, not everything is beneficial. All things are allowed, but not all things build up. Not everything is edifying, and not everything builds people up. So I hope that we can strive to build a community and a culture that encourages growth and support. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers who gave public comment. We have a couple pieces of community engagement. We will first hear from Sadra Mehdi Alekbakpour about a 4-day school week. I hope I said your name even close to right.
Yeah, it was close.
Okay. Feel free. Say it how you say it. Introduce yourself.
Sadra. My name is Sadra. Yeah, it's a tough one. I have a resource to hand out. Should I go ahead and start this side? And am I good to begin? So, good evening, everyone. I'm Sadra Ali Akbarpour. a junior at Rockbridge High School, and I'm here tonight with the goal of better informing the community about the 4-day school week, with the long-term goal of working with the district to later reach a decision on its implementation. Given that goal, I believe that a plan of action is needed, and my suggestion for it is as follows. I want to conduct CPS-specific research alongside the district, which can include sending out surveys or compiling district metrics, in order to work with the district subcommittee to examine the outcomes of a 4-day school week. This project began with a moment I experienced by chance just a few months ago, when I was in class following a Wednesday in which we had no school. I was speaking with my classmates who argued that having a day off every week would be fantastic. I, initially, thought that the concept of a 4-day school week was absolutely ridiculous, but that conversation, along with an increasing number of articles and schools switching to the 4-day school week, piqued my interest. Since then, with the help of my valuable teachers and peers, I've thoroughly researched whether or not a 4-day school week would be beneficial for our school district, and the results are in. I have found with the appropriate implementation, a 4-day school week would be beneficial for Columbia Public Schools. We currently face many challenges in our district, from decreasing teacher satisfaction to widening student achievement gaps, both of which, along with many more, are continuing to affect the academic performance of scholars like me and countless others. Fortunately, a 4-day school week offers unique opportunities that can help solve these issues. The good news is that you don't just need to take my word for it. There are countless statistics proving the benefits. For scholars, the schedule improves their health, prevents instructional loss from extracurricular travel, provides them career exploration time, remedial opportunities, and asynchronous learning. Teachers also benefit greatly from the schedule, noting lower stress rates, a better work-life balance, and increased satisfaction. What's more is that the schedule helps attract higher quality and more experienced faculty members, which has a positive effect on academic performance. One of the primary concerns with the 4-day school week is that the 5th day is going to waste. However, this 5th day is not just a day off, it's a restructured day with childcare opportunities, internships, community support, tutoring, and more. To provide an even longer list of benefits with empirical data and research for the 4-day school week, I've gone ahead and handed out resources to board members. But ultimately, by preserving total instructional time and taking the appropriate precautions for the 5th day, the schedule is beneficial for scholars, teachers, and parents alike. It's important to note that most districts do not preserve instructional time, and that is why lowered academic performance is common, although not inherent in these districts. And as I previously stated, we can avoid this by preserving our total instructional time and providing opportunities for scholars on the 5th day. With the appropriate implementation and precautions, a 4-day school week will be beneficial for our students, teachers, parents, and various other stakeholders seeking to benefit from this change. The links to my website and my email are on the provided resource. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sadra. We will next hear from Jamie Lloyd about the field trip waiver form.
Good evening. My name is Jamie. I stand before you tonight not only as a parent of an amazing CPS student, but also as an employee of our amazing CPS schools. I'm here to express my concerns regarding the recent updates to the district's field trip form, specifically the personal liability and release of liability sections. The language states that by signing the form, you agree to release CPS from all forms of liability, including illness, injury, and even death. While I understand the importance of ensuring student safety, I believe this new overreaching waiver goes too far. It places an undue burden on parents and guardians, and I'm not the only one who feels this way. In fact, district administration, as you are well aware, put together an FAQ document for school principals to use when answering the flood of questions that have been coming in. I've been told by district administration that in cases of gross negligence, this form would not apply. I've also been told by Dr. Yearwood himself that it doesn't matter what the form says. Nothing in this form would hold up in court. Then why are you asking parents and guardians to sign this form? Our community values education, and recognizes the benefits of experiential learning through field trips. However, the revised, overreaching liability waiver shifts too much responsibility onto families, discouraging them from allowing their children to participate in these valuable educational experiences. It's crucial to strike a balance between ensuring safety and not imposing excessive legal responsibilities on our families. Education is a collaborative effort, and we should work together to create an environment that fosters learning without creating unnecessary barriers. I urge you, the governing board of our school district, to reconsider the language of the liability section, taking into account the concerns raised by parents and guardians. Let's find a solution that upholds safety standards while promoting a supportive and inclusive educational experience for all students. And for the families who share my concerns, I urge you to reach out to Dr. Yearwood and the board to let them know your voice is heard. We cannot sit in silence. We must speak out, even if our voice shakes. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to student voice. We have a group of students representing all three of our high schools. As soon as I find the email from the teacher, I will introduce them. Okay, the Teaching Professions Career Cluster is a 3-course sequence that is available to students beginning in their sophomore year at Battle, Hickman, and Rockbridge. These courses are designed to give students an opportunity to explore the field of education as a career and experience the classroom in different capacities. To date, there are over 30 former teaching professions students employed as educators at CPS. Yes? Is she here? Okay.
Hi, my name is Mary Cadania. I'm a senior at Hickman High School, and I'm in the third year level of teaching professions.
Hi, my name is Amanda Mahaney. I'm a senior at Battles High School, and I'm in the third year of teaching professions.
Hi, my name is Jayla Kemp. I'm a senior at Rockbridge High School, and I'm in the second year of the teaching professions courses.
Hi, my name is JC Rowland. I'm a junior at Battle High School, and I'm in the second year teaching professions class.
So in our first course in the cluster, we start with the history of education and acts that helped make changes in education, like Brown versus Board. We get lots of guest speakers who come in, including school board members, the superintendent and principals. We also learn about classroom management, so how to seat your classroom and how to create a classroom environment that's going to help your students prosper. And then moving into semester 2 of that course, we have a job shadow day where we get to pick a teacher of any subject, any grade, and we shadow them for their contract hours, so before and after school. We also get to create a classroom model, which we get to go back to our first semester knowledge that we learned about the classroom management and creating an environment, and we get to show how we would set up our own classroom. We also start mentorships with elementary schools. So once a month we go and we read and do small lessons with a small group of 4th and 5th graders. I actually got to make a really good relationship in connection with one of my mentor students who I then saw later this year in middle school during one of our internships, which we can get back into. And he was really struggling, and I was able to connect with him once again and help him get back on track. And then you also get to create and present your first lesson plan or your first attempt at a lesson plan. But overall, this class just really helps you decide if you want to continue in this profession or if it's not for you.
In the second year class, we start with 3 11-week placements, one in middle school, one in elementary, and one in early childhood. It helps us to narrow down and pick what we want to do before we get into college and see where we prosper at. So my first placement, I chose Oakland in a 7th grade math class. And while at our placement, we are there for 2 days a week. So while we're there the 2 days a week, we are learning about adolescent cognitive development and physical growth. But we also get to see it in the class while we're there, and we do assignments based off of where the kids are at in their development. We also get to make a lesson plan and observe our teacher's lesson plan. So for my lesson plan, I made a 7th grade math lesson plan over the area of circles. We also have had 2 guest speakers so far, Dr. Manira Alfahart and Mr. Brinkley, who is the district behavior support counselor. Both came and talked to us about behaviors that you see in the classroom and what outside factors can cause those behaviors, like ACEs, and different classroom management techniques that you can use to help support those students. And then my sophomore year, I was able to be a TA at Battle Elementary, and now I'm in my second placement for this class at Cedar Ridge, and I've seen a wide variety of behaviors and diversity in the classroom, and that has just helped me for when I become a teacher to see and have all those resources and tools in my toolbox. So throughout these 3 rotations, I have been able to branch out between middle school, elementary, and early childhood, and I found out that middle school wasn't really my jam, but however, elementary and early childhood, I was thriving. I made a lot of connections and learned a lot about myself through all of it, and it was really cool to see how kids grow and how they learn throughout the year and how to deal with the behaviors and teaching strategies and all of that. But also for this class, we create a portfolio, a teaching portfolio, and inside this is observations that we make and teacher evaluations that they'll give us, and also lesson plans that we will make throughout the year. And it's really cool, and we also add on to it in the 3rd class too. So lesson plans, teacher evaluations, and all of that. And we can always look back on it for to see how we're growing and things that we need to get better on, especially with the teacher evaluations. And then lastly, what's super cool is during at the end, the 2nd semester of this course, we get to take the para test, and for the first year last year, our whole class passed, and it was really cool. And we got to take it, and yeah, it was really exciting.
So unlike Amanda, I want to be a middle school teacher. So we need more of them out there. I want to be a history teacher. So with this class, I really loved history. I've taken every single AP class offered at Hickman High School that I could take in history. So this class has helped me wanting to become a middle school history teacher. So unlike the 2nd year class, they intern 2 days a week. Me and Amanda are waking up early. We're every single day at our school. I wake up same time middle school goes to school, and I'm with them every single day, and I love that. And with our 2-week rotations, in first semester, we get to decide where we want to go. And I decided to choose between 7th and 8th grade. So in 7th grade, it's just a traditional 55-minute class that is in history. But I decided to go to Jeff Middle School, and they're doing the block invitation. And since I've been in the block class, I wanted to see how they're doing it in the middle school because it was a new thing. It's still trying to be developed. So I just want to see if I would want to teach that in high school. And with the internship with 2nd semester, we'll be student teaching, so we'll be actually implementing more lessons, more hands-on in depth in the classroom, and we'll also be able to take our sub test since we are 18. So we'll be subbing for you guys in the summer. And for For Educators Rising, it is our student organization, basically like DECA and HOSA, and we get to do a lot of community involvement. I've been president for the past 3 years, and for the involvement, We've been recently raising money for the MU Children's Hospital. We're actually raising money tomorrow to support families in need for this time for Christmas. We've raised money for Lizzie's Walk of Faith, and we've also had our annual trunk or treat where we invite all different organizations within CPS to come out, wear costumes, invite children to hand out candy and have some fun.
With Educators Rising, we are given the opportunity to go to a leadership conference. So at this conference this year, we went to UMSL. So we got a tour of the campus and we got to learn about the education programs that they offered. We also got to meet other chapters within Educators Rising and create a bond with them. But then you also get introduced to the competitions that they offer at both state and nationals.
So speaking about competitions, I was able to compete at the state and national level, and I won first place my sophomore year at nationals with the lesson plan and delivery. So I basically, as a sophomore, got to teach a lesson and have my teacher videotape me and send it through into Educators Rising. And with this, doing the lesson over and over for the past 3 years, I was able to reflect. And basically with middle school especially, your first lesson isn't always going to be the best lesson that you teach that day, but towards you get to like 5th hour, I mean, it's true. I mean, I've experienced it with like watching my teachers because they always change like their lesson plan for second hour or third, and it's like better at the time. So it's helping us to reflect on what we could do better and how to like just adjust it to our students' learning styles because not every single student's gonna learn the same.
I have been fortunate enough to compete also at the state and national level in the interactive bulletin board competition. So with that, I made a bulletin board. I had to create basically a lesson plan to implement it into a classroom where every single student will benefit from it. But it also taught me that time management is no joke in the teaching profession. You basically have to plan everything out, find a way to make it work, find a way to change it on the fly if it doesn't work, come up with multiple different ideas and ways that you can implement it depending on what you are teaching. And it has really helped to prepare me for when I do become a teacher.
And do you guys have any questions for us?
I have one. It's all really, really impressive, all the things you do. And I'm also really curious if one of you could share, like, because you're still taking your regular high school classes. So, like, what does your day actually look like? Because I'm trying to figure out how you actually fit all this stuff in along with all your other stuff.
So I'm a senior and I have a full schedule as a senior. I'm not part-time. So I basically, since this takes up my first hour every single day, basically like the block class, I wake up at around 6 a.m., make it over to Jeff probably by 7:15, go to the first 2 periods of class, which is basically the block class, which I'm in right now. And then I usually have like a short 30-minute gap in between, and then I have a lunch, and then I go to school for the whole day, and then work afterwards. So I have a pretty packed day. With foundations, it looks different because with them, they only go Tuesdays and Thursdays compared to Amanda and I. We go every single day. So they go back to our teacher on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to get like feedback from lessons and like be able to reflect in the moment. But Amanda and I are fully in the teaching mode right now.
It's super impressive, and you all are going to be amazing teachers.
Thank you.
I just want to say you're hired. Yes, but I do want to recognize your teacher that's in the audience today, Miss Regina Greenplate, that has basically oversaw this program and has done a magnificent job with our scholars, getting them to this level. Just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And we can tell quality is here with us, and we look forward to this quality in our schools one day. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much for hearing our experience.
Thank you. We look forward to welcoming you to CPS as employees in a few years, but as substitutes now. Not kidding. We will next hear from the MSTA Association President, Carrie Stith, followed by the CMNEA President, Noel Gilzo.
Again, to have to follow that. I hope you wrote down their names, Michelle, every single one of them. I have had the honor of working with one of them at Battle Elementary and super excited to see her continue. Good evening. CMSTA represents over 400 teachers and staff at CPS. We are working hard to make sure that teachers' voices are heard and supported. Teachers in our district have always worked hard to create an environment for learning and becoming the future of our community. We have asked teachers to share the great happenings in their schools. West Middle School shared that they're really motivating students in RTI this year, and they're showing the growth. A teacher shared that they have a great staff that works so well together. They have a cool zoo, kind of gives away where they are. I really enjoy my students, especially my 8th graders this year. They have fun together every day. At Oakland Middle, they have been granted tons of funding to increase student engagement and accessibility. The math department is working hard to use virtual space to increase student engagement in math classrooms. We also want teachers to feel like we have a collective place to share our concerns and what we can do to improve our district to make sure that we are working towards CPS Best every day. Teachers share that they are concerned with student behavior. Students are able to put their hands on in an aggressive manner on another student and then return to class on the same day or sometimes the same period without any restorative practices being completed within the class. We know that the district has worked hard to create a behavior matrix, but how are we ensuring to make sure that it is being used correctly in every building? Several buildings have shared that student behavior is out of control and causing many teachers to feel unsafe and unsupported in their classrooms and buildings. Teachers have expressed that they are working with district initiatives such as restorative practices, but when a student leaves the classroom 5 to 6 times a day, how do you keep up with that? How do you keep up with restorative practices and still teach a curriculum? Disruptive behaviors within the classroom are taking away from student learning. How can teachers, staff, admin, and parents work together to see improvement in these areas? Thank you for always taking the time to listen to our concerns. We know that we are working towards the same goal of improving every day. We want teachers to be supported and we want to share concerns, not to complain, but to have the goal to work together to come up with a solution to make CPS the best. As we look at the continued work with school boundaries, we have to do this with equity in mind. Our last boundary change was not equitable. The title buildings that were affected are not seeing more of a balance, but less of a balance. We have to dig deeper than just house prices and medium income, and we have to study who are our families in those neighborhoods. We have to go the extra mile on this shift. We just had a shift 2 years ago with our most at-risk students. We can't do this without working together. We must make sure that we are keeping with the promise of not moving any of those students again. As we move into the collective bargaining season, I realize that currently my role in the bargaining session is to listen, take notes, and report back to my membership. Unfortunately, I do not have the opportunity to speak for members that I represent, and you can imagine how challenging it is to not interject on certain topics that concern teacher and student welfare. CMSTA believes in a respectful, open dialogue with all parties that respect teachers, students, and staff. Thank you so much for taking our time and always listening to our concerns. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Noelle Gilzo, President of CMNEA, the duly elected exclusive bargaining representative for the teachers of CPS. Next month, we will begin bargaining to improve teacher compensation and working conditions, which are CPS students' learning conditions. Tonight, you will vote to approve bargaining parameters for this process. In an effort to address some concerns the CMNEA bargaining team had raised about the process from previous years, the board drafted some options for bargaining parameters for our consideration. Thank you for thoughtfully attempting to address these concerns. However, the one option that included board member observers also included a non-union representative observer, which constitutes voluntary recognition of an unelected professional group as a representative for district teachers, in violation of Board Policy HH1. We are hopeful that our response to the presented options has been taken into careful consideration prior to tonight's vote. Unless modifications were made that include board member participation in an otherwise open or closed session, our desire then is to proceed with the first proposed closed session option, as it is the practice in many labor negotiations, including many Missouri school districts. Recent national events have once again raised awareness about school safety, prompting the district to issue a letter to reassure students and staff that CPS is taking significant measures to protect us, including training and drills, hardening our schools to external threats, monitoring and detecting weapons in our schools, continuing partnerships with mental health organizations and the Columbia Police Department, and signing onto a Missouri State Alert System for emergency response. All of these are very important for safety and security. External threats are not the primary thing that make us feel unsafe from day to day. While external threats are in the back of our minds, it is student violence and fighting, elopement, and dysregulated behaviors that pose the biggest safety concern in our daily lives at school. This weekend, I surveyed CMNEA members about safety and security. About 25% of our 730 members responded. Most were pre-K through elementary teachers. When asked, do you know the board policy or contractual obligations for you as it relates to student violence and fights within your school? 55% answered no. Have you been instructed by your building administration what you should do in the event of student violence or fighting? 58% no. Have you received adequate training in dealing with or de-escalating student conflict based on your specific role? 65% no. Regarding an instance of student violence or fighting in the last 2 years, 61% reported that this did not apply to them, thankfully. But 20% reported that a trained administrator did not come to assist. 16% said that a trained administrator took more than 20 minutes to arrive to help. 7% stated that assistance was denied when the office was called, and 13% were unsure. In the last 2 years, 70% have reported that they have been verbally assaulted or cussed out. 31% had been hit, pushed, or kicked. 11% had been scratched or bitten. 8% had been punched. When asked if they felt they received adequate response from their building administration, 48% said no, and 20% said this question did not pertain to them. When asked, do you feel there are enough staff and trained adults within your building to monitor and respond to student violence and fighting? 67% said no. Before you think I'm calling out building administrators, I want to be crystal clear. Building administrators are mostly doing what they can. They are stretched too thin. I'm asking for help. These responses are alarming, but nothing that has not been brought to the board and district repeatedly. Educators in our buildings are getting hurt, seriously hurt. and they are struggling to get the benefits section 5.14 of our CBA assures them, and have not received clear procedural guidelines regarding handling student violence and fighting. Stop, I am a teacher, from our vectored videos is woefully inadequate response to these situations. Respondents also commented that they haven't received instruction except wait for administration when a fight breaks out. Student behaviors are ignored at the school. Students run the school and adults allow it. They haven't received training information once per semester as stated in the CBA. They haven't received training on dealing with student conflict. Remember Sarita, my fictional character who suffered anxiety and physical symptoms of secondary trauma from her classroom experience? Students like her exist in our schools. And some don't come to school very often because they are afraid, mostly of the other students. If we truly want our schools to be safe spaces, Board Policy GBCB1, Educational Welfare, 9, Active Supervision, 10, Protecting Safety and Welfare of Students, as well as Policy CF, Administration is charged with the supervision of students and staff, should be followed with fidelity. We are asking tonight that you review our policies and procedures. What worked before doesn't in our current educational landscape. We need to allot equivalent resources to safety within our walls as we do for our perimeters. Thank you.
Thank you to our teacher representative groups. We do hear what you are saying. This is not the time for us to ask you questions or to respond to the things you've said, but I see us all taking notes. And these things do come up in our meetings with Dr. Yearwood and our discussions with administration. And we appreciate your candid words to us about what you're experiencing as teachers. We do value all the work you do, and we do want your work environment to be the best it can be. Okay. Moving on to the report of the superintendent, we'll first have an attendance area update from Mr. Gooch.
Well, that's a little deceptive because most of this is going to be from our friend from Cooperative Strategies, Karen Jackson. And I'm going to get the PowerPoint up here, and then we're going to let her begin, and then we'll be happy to answer questions or entertain your comments also at the end of this. All right, Karen, you're smarter than I and more savvy, but there it is. Like I said, this is Karen Jackson. She's worked with us over the last 5 years. The first one she did was about 5 years ago, and she partnered with another consultant on that. And then the last time we did this, she was the primary point person on this. She brings a lot of experience, and she knows a whole lot about Columbia Public School in our attendance areas. So I'm going to let her present. And like I said, we'll be happy to entertain your questions at the end.
Thanks, Randy. I'm a little taller than him. All right, well, thanks for having me. As Randy said, my name's Karen Jackson. It used to be Karen Daniel Hamburg. It's a lot easier to remember now, so that's great. I'm with Cooperative Strategies. Actually, I think that's my next slide. Every time? Oh, I see. Okay. I thought I had to press that every time. There we go. I'm with Cooperative Strategies. We do this kind of work all over the country. Just a quick note, we were recently acquired by a company called Woolpert. All that means is I have a different domain name on my email. Our team is still the same, I'm still the same, and I will still be your primary contact throughout this process. this is our overall attendance area process. It is an iterative process. We have multiple opportunities for stakeholders to provide input. I do have a slide for each of these, so I'm just going to kind of breeze past this here. So we're starting out, and this is kind of where we are today. This is our plan for planning portion of the process. So what we're doing is confirming the timeline right now. It's still a draft at the moment. Discussing anything else we want to accomplish, defining our expectation, and then again discussing any additional goals beyond your guiding principles that we have for this process. You do have a great set of guiding principles that we will use, and toward the end of this I will be asking you if there's anything else you would like us to consider. Something that we didn't do last time, but I know there was interest in, is looking at different diversity factors. In other districts that I work in, we use diversity factors such as race, using census data, of course, because we can't use it at the student level, household income, and then level of adult educational attainment, all available through the census website. So that's something else we're going to consider throughout this process, and again, I'll be asking you about that in just a little bit here. So the next step in our process is going to be gathering our background data. We're going to be looking at things such as current utilizations, program placements, any diversity goals that you have or other stakeholders have for this process. We're going to be developing enrollment projections and housing yield projections. We'll do a lot of current state mapping. We'll show density, student density based on different factors, demographics, capacities, utilizations, transfers, all of that. Ms. Snodgrass, I did add your walk zone maps in there. I know that was your request the last time, so we'll be looking at those again. Those walk zones, especially when it comes to transportation, those are a tool we can use to help with that. We'll look at what the boundaries would look like if every student attended their geographically closest school. That is a question we get every time we do this process. Why can't my kid just go to their closest school? Unfortunately, just based on where the schools exist today and where the populations have migrated over time, it won't be possible. So it's a great tool to show. Unfortunately, as much as we would like to assign students to their closest school, it can't always be possible. We will also have a project website throughout this process. The first thing that's going to go on this is this presentation. We will put a background data report that just shows all of this information, the current state of the schools, on the project website as well. And we really strive to be as transparent as possible throughout the process. As I mentioned before, we will be doing enrollment projections, and these are going to be by boundary of residence. That is a little bit different from enrollment projections by school of attendance. As you know, there are some transfers. I could live in one boundary and go to a different school for a variety of reasons. So these are going to be based on geography, which kind of gives us an idea of shifting populations and trends in specific areas, which is incredibly helpful for drawing boundaries. We'll look at historical enrollment by grade, by year, by boundary. We'll look at historical live birth counts for the district. We'll also be pulling building permits and looking at housing developments. As I understand, the Southwest Corridor is still on fire with developments, so we'll certainly be taking a closer look at that, and then we'll also be taking a look at some census data sets. This slide just shows an example of what's to come in that report. We'll show student density. I really like these maps. They show the student density in 2013-14 compared to the student density from last school year. And as you can see, their hotspots are really changing throughout the district. What will come out of the enrollment projection report will be 4 different projections: a low, moderate, high, and a recommended. The low, moderate, and high are based on statistics and just in formulas. The recommended is really where we take a look at those developments and other trends that are very specific to each area and apply those. We do have a committee that we'll be working with throughout this process. They're an advisory board that's going to be kind of checking us throughout the process, making sure we're not coming up with anything that's a little too crazy or just would not fly. We want to make sure they're geographically diverse and they agree to consider the district as a whole. And the other thing we'll be doing are focus groups. We did this last time with a lot of success. We had very targeted focus groups. Some were with developers, some were with communities that are historically hard to reach. That way we're making sure that we are getting input from everybody, especially those who are going to be impacted within this process. Well, this work obviously comes with drawing boundaries. We will develop and revise boundary options throughout the process. And we will be using those boundary guidelines to guide our options creation and then anything else that you want us to take a look at as we go through this. Once we create those options and kind of give them through our focus groups, get them through our steering committee, we will be presenting them to the community. I believe this is at the end of March. We'll have a week set out and we will be having multiple community engagement opportunities for folks to come in, ask questions, learn a little bit about the process. Last time we had a lot of success with this. A lot of folks that came in just wanted to know more about the process. So we were really happy with the outcome of those. We will also have online feedback opportunities for folks. If for some reason they can't come to our in-person meetings, they'll be available to provide feedback online. Once at the close of all of that, we will provide a report and we'll put it on the project website that'll show what the results were and all of that information. The only thing we typically redact is if anybody, a lot of times people will put identifying information in it. So we'll of course take that out because it's going to be a public document. Once we get that feedback, we will be going back to the drawing board. Something I really, really like about this process is that we will take that feedback, listen to what people have to say, and make revisions based on that feedback. If you look at the top left of this slide, I really, really like this. It shows where we started in our elementary boundary process last time to where we ended. And as you can see, there were about 20 different iterations of maps before we got to our final product, and those iterations were all based on that community feedback that we heard. So I think in the middle of April, and I do have a slide that shows our timeline, we will be presenting you with phase 1 recommendations. That is to fill the Russell Boulevard addition. We also, we're thinking this is going to be a phased process. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. We're thinking this is going to be a phased process. So Russell Boulevard recommendations will come first, and then after that, I believe in June, we'll be presenting you with other recommendations for the following year once we get some additional capacity at our other schools. And of course, the new Southwest Elementary School. So this slide shows our draft process timeline. Right now, we are in our data collection period. We're getting started with those enrollment projections. Come January, we will be starting those focus groups, as well as our long range or steering committee work. February through April, we'll be doing planning development, again, more revisions of those options that we create. And then, as I said before, phase 1, we're looking for approval in April, phase 2 and 3 in July. In looking at this, I will be coming to you multiple times throughout the process to give you updates as well. So you'll be seeing a lot of me. And like I said before, I do have a couple questions for you all. As we get started in this process, again, of course, no decisions have been made. We haven't even started drawing boundary options yet. So before we get started, I would like to know, and it's okay, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, what would you consider a successful outcome of this process? And are there any additional factors you would like us to consider beyond those guiding principles that we should consider throughout the process? Yeah, there we go. I'm struggling with that too.
It takes 2 fingers. I don't know how you do this, but to take into consideration not removing children who recently have moved or families that have recently moved. I think that's going to be very important.
Okay. That's great feedback.
I personally value proximity to the building just because parent engagement in schools is really important for the success of the student, and we're more likely to get students who can do after school activities and parents who are going to show up to PTA meetings and fundraisers and volunteer in the schools and come to the parties and do all those things if they don't have to drive across town to do that. Thank you. Okay.
Wait. Oh, I was just gonna say, when you ask what would you consider a successful outcome, if we don't get any angry emails.
Oh.
Like everyone's totally happy with it. I'm just gonna put that out there into the universe just in case.
Fingers crossed.
I actually think a
We are moving
successful negotiation means that like nobody gets everything they want.
Okay.
But like people can live with what it is. But I actually think the communication up front is the most important part. Because people will go berserk if they feel like a decision was made without their input or that their input wasn't heard. And so we're going to have to figure out as a board how we want to receive people's comments also, rather than having people sign up to give public comment about the boundary changes, have like kind of like we did when we appointed Karen to fill the vacancy, have like a separate way to contact the board about this specific issue. And then, you know, in addition to the focus groups and the engagement pieces, things like that.
That's a great idea.
Mr. Willoughby.
No, yeah, I know the current, what you have up here on the slides doesn't mean that those are the specific dates and things of that nature. Just for us to be thinking about, as we're looking at the public kind of engagement of when we get to that space, I know that we're thinking about late March, but if potentially looking more at like early April, because I know that if we're looking at late March, that means we're getting close to spring break time when people will be either leaving early or not be in town. And so just if we, and I'm not saying it has to be early April, just to have that in mind.
Do know that probably midway through February, we want to have most of those focus groups already started and in action. So that's kind of that one of those big first steps that we get, and we start getting some feedback. And then it helps us then to be able to start to develop some options. Then the feedback, once you starts getting some options, is a little bit easier because you kind of start seeing some of those parameters. We plan to really, kind of offer a number of things. Something that, a plan that looks, I guess, for lack of a better word, kind of a status quo. What does, of kind of how the current boundaries are drawn. Obviously, we will have, requests to look at different things, so we can put those alongside. But as that initial group of options gets developed, then it's a little easier to gather feedback, because then you have something to point to. What do you like? You like 1 or you like 18? Which is, which is the most desirable? So you can start kind of getting some general feels of kind of what those appetites are. So.
And just to piggyback off that, I do think it's important to mention that some of those guiding principles are going to be in contradiction of one another. If the goal is to balance socioeconomics, let's say, that may be at the expense of proximity. So we just need to remember that as we go through it. I think each guiding principle says attempt to do this, or where possible do this, and that's really important with this process because they will be in contradiction of one another.
And what we've done the previous 2 times we've done this, we've had options that have a focus on proximity versus a more in the area of balance and diversity. So we plan to also bring those type options as well, and those can be rounded out in many ways.
And President Waters, I just have to say, because I forget if you were here the last time we were doing it. I know Jean was, but I feel like the way that Cooperative Strategies does their survey stuff like worked out really well of giving us a lot of that feedback, because it also was correlating to what they were kind of pointing at with looking at the maps. And so it wasn't just like feedback to the board that wasn't associated to that map. They're like looking at the map and giving out feedback and stuff like that. So I think that there's a way for us to cooperate with them instead of us having to create like our own kind of way of like capturing that information as a separate way, as what you're kind of talking about how we did with the appointing Ms. Hayes.
Yeah, I would say in general, the best way to give feedback is in one of our surveys, because I go through every single one of those responses and read and make sure that we are accounting for that if we can.
So I guess we'll have to decide as a board if we want to not hear public comment on boundary changes. So that'll be, we'll have to explore as a board the number of ways we want to elicit and receive community feedback, but certainly appreciate your expertise in the matter and your experience.
If you want to talk through kind of that time frame of when maybe it becomes wider and open after a few of those options are made available, then we're not just talking, I don't want this to happen. Well, we can point to a specific option, what's tolerable, what's not tolerable. So we may want to look at that timeline and help you guys decide when some key pivotal points are to maybe change the way you gather information.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Well, that's all I have. Are there any questions for me or? Okay. Great. Well, thanks again. It's great to be back.
Thank you, Karen. So next we'll hear from New Solutions K-12. And I believe Nate Levinson is joining us via Zoom.
He is. He is, and they're about to queue him up now.
Okay.
Hello.
Oh, yay, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now, as they say?
Yes.
Outstanding. I can hear and see you as well. As introduced, I'm Nate Levinson, president of New Solutions K-12, and happy to be with you all tonight. What I wanted to do tonight is fairly briefly give you an update where we are in our support of the district and some of its key priorities around supporting students who struggle academically and supporting the findings of the curriculum audit as well. So what I thought I would do is spend 10 minutes or so walking through a short PowerPoint with an update of reminding folks of what our goals were, where we are so far, what's coming next, and then happy to take any questions that come after that. Does that seem like a good use of our time tonight? All righty, then let me share my screen, and hopefully folks are seeing this as well. So let's start with a recap for those of you who either don't remember or weren't on the board when we first started this work, which began more than a year and a half ago. Our work under this current contract is to help implement the key findings from two reviews. One that we did on how to support students with special needs and other students who struggled academically, and also a curriculum audit that was done by a different organization. As you may remember, there was a lot of overlap. Certainly both organizations saw the world very similarly as far as what the challenges were and what the solutions were. And as a result, I think it made sense to combine those efforts. 5 overarching goals coming out of those two studies. The first was to implement a standardized curriculum. Both we and the other consulting group and virtually all of the best practices say that if you really want to raise achievement in a large district with a lot of teachers, a lot of new teachers, with kids who move between schools, having a standardized curriculum is just a bedrock to making that happen. We also wanted to identify and then help build the capacity to implement teaching and learning best practices, where if you think of curriculum is the what you teach, teaching and learning best practices are how you teach it. A third goal of our effort was to help address low expectations through what we are calling high growth teacher exemplars, which as I read that is a mouthful. Let me dissect that one because I think this one's really important. Our findings and the findings of others, and I think I even heard a few speakers tonight mention that sometimes very caring people in their way of caring lower expectations for kids with disabilities, for kids living in poverty, perhaps kids of color. It may be well-intentioned, but it is definitely not helpful. It does not correlate to higher outcomes. And in our research, we certainly met more teachers than would have liked, who through good intentions did have low expectations. And we know from our research that it is hard to change expectations. It is hard to change how people feel and think. And one of the most effective ways of doing that is to identify folks within your own district, within your own schools, working within the same complex context, who have achieved much higher growth and achievement with their students, and asking and using them to share their strategies and their beliefs with their colleagues. So that is what goal number 3 means in simpler English. Goal number 4 was to rethink the organizational structure at the central office. How should you best be organized to do all of these things? And probably the least direct and the most long-lasting goal, as we do the first 4 goals, we want to build capacity for effective implementation of not just these efforts, but implementation of other efforts in the future through both focus and feedback. We're going to dive a bit into each of these, but that's just a quick reminder of what our goal was. I think it's also important to remember our work is not to write a report. We're not studying what to do. We are a partner with the leadership of the district, helping them actually implement these changes. That puts us in the role of a critical friend, of somebody to help with analysis, but it is not, the outcome is not a report. Ultimately, the outcome is the implementation of these very important priorities. Where are we? This contract started roughly in August. So we're clearly a number of months in, but not halfway through. And I would say, I would summarize it as solid, steady progress and still much to do. I think there has been very meaningful input from teachers and principals on virtually every step of our major undertakings. At least in my sense, the highest level of input probably in the last decade or more, that has been such a major focus of this effort. We've also seen a good effort to focus on a relatively small number of the most important elements. I think historically, most school districts try to do 100 things. You will never do 100 things well, at least not all at once. I think, to be 100% candid, which is the only way I know how to be, the district is still learning how to implement well. It is a skill. It is a skill that we're still developing. It is a skill that, as I've shared in the past, was probably not a strong suit of the district. That is not a criticism of anybody who's been there or leading the district, but historically, your prior superintendent really did emphasize that each school was the unit of change, not the district as a whole. Current superintendent and best practices say that the district needs to be an important player in raising achievement and helping to implement some of these very large scale efforts. But this is a relatively new approach where central office plays a lead and guiding role. And I think as a result of this being a new effort, we are seeing the leadership team being stretched pretty thin, trying to balance both day-to-day work, which does not go away, and which is clearly you're a large, complex district, and trying to support these very large improvement efforts. As I said, steady, solid progress, but still an awful lot to do. A little more specifically, the update on the common curriculum. As we said, if you think of common curriculum as the what to teach, what are the lessons, the rigor, the pacing, the assessments. And we've never seen a district dramatically raise achievement without having a common curriculum. Where we are today is at the K-8 level. There was a fair amount of curriculum already developed in years past. It was generally viewed as optional at both the teacher and sometimes the school level. We have taken that material that already existed And when I say we, I mean the entire district, not just New Solutions. That material has received multiple rounds of feedback from principals and teachers in central office. It has also been refined. In some cases, the rigor has been amped up where folks felt it wasn't rigorous enough. There is a lot of feedback, not just on the content of the curriculum, but also the format and ease of use. And a lot of the curriculum have gone through multiple iterations to make it more easy to use and accessible through your software. There has been less headway at the high school, because if you think about high schools, the curriculum is more by individual course. Rather than there is a 7th grade math curriculum or a 3rd grade reading curriculum. High schools, it is more course specific. My sense is that there is a lot of, we are more than halfway in having defined the curriculum. We are more than halfway in receiving a lot of feedback. We are more than halfway in updating the curriculum based on that feedback. But I don't believe we are, and nor did we expect to be, ready to launch all of this tomorrow. But it does seem to be moving forward at a solid pace, and most importantly, with a lot of feedback loops along the way, especially in the K-8 and some high school courses as well. The second big goal about those teaching and learning best practices, this really gets at the question of how do you help support teachers be great teachers regardless of the content. And we know that to help teachers be great teachers, instructional coaching is going to be an important part of that. But you have to have, as a district, a set of shared expectations for what defines great teaching. Now, I want to be very clear about this. There is more than one way to be a great teacher. There is not just one answer to that. But if every teacher and every school and every coach has a different answer to how they're going to help people become a great teacher, there's very little you can do as a system to onboard and support teachers. There's very little you can do through coaching. So the recommendations were to select a small number of existing best practices so that you can help get good at it and others can help build capacity. The district has selected Teach Like a Champion as one of the core references. I think we are still wrestling a bit with thinking about what do we keep from past efforts on effective teaching, and are they the same as Teach Like a Champion? Are they different? They are good, as is Teach Like a Champion, but again, there's great power in having a smaller list that is widely shared. There's been a lot of conversation and a lot of development of these best practices at the principal and central office level, and we're just starting to share with teachers. The decision was made that it was important to get alignment with the leadership before we went out to get feedback from teachers, but we need the feedback from teachers next before we can come to you and say, hey, these are in fact the core teaching and learning instructional practices that will become the standard across the district. Again, I feel like we are making solid headway in a very inclusive way, but still not yet ready to roll them out tomorrow, which was always the plan, but just wished we could be ready even sooner. Third area I wanted to update you on is this identifying of those high growth teachers. Again, the purpose of identifying high growth teachers was to ask them and partner with them to be examples and supports for their colleagues, to be living examples that in fact students who have historically struggled academically can in fact achieve at high levels. At this point, a draft list, at least at the K-8 level, has been generated. The methodology for how that list of identifying high growth teachers is being reviewed and validated by principals, in fact, and other central office leaders on Wednesday of this week. And we'll be gathering additional information if folks feel like, hey, this was the right process and these are the right people, starting to think through how best to utilize these teachers. And of course, the next step will be to get with the teachers and get their thoughts as well. So again, I think we're right on track in this effort as well. We did think about your organizational chart, the kind of who does what in the central office. And I want to say something. I say this as a former school board member and as a former superintendent. And sometimes those two past lives can be at odds. I will say as a school board member, trimming the central office always seemed to be the most enjoyable thing we could do every year. And as a superintendent, it felt and fit very different. What we're seeing is for a district that has a lot going on, these are all very major efforts underway. And just listening, for example, to your speakers tonight about the need for very substantial support around behavior management as well and other major efforts, you will need a very well-functioning, sizable central office to make all these things come to life and come to life well. We know that teachers are the most important people in a school system when it comes to raising achievement. They're more important than the central office. And we know that principals have great impact on teachers. So if teachers are the most important, I think principals are the second most. But we also know that strong, effective central office leadership helps principals and help teachers do what they need to do. And you need to have all three of these working well. In August, there was a central office reorganization. Before the reorganization, the primary split was, hey, we had an elementary group and a secondary group. And each of those groups were overseeing both academics and operations. So yes, they had the same grade level, but that's a really wide span of things to worry about. After the reorganization, there was a head of academics and then also a head of operations. And we do think, given all that you have going on, that that was a split that made a lot of sense. We think this brought back greater focus and priority to raising achievement for the academic side, and also allowed the head of school side, the operations side, to really focus on that very important work as well. So we thought that was a good move. I think it is playing out the way we wanted. It's a step in the right direction. We're still seeing top leadership stretched very, very thin. And I don't know if the superintendent knew I was going to say this, but I want to say that your superintendent, Dr. Yearwood, is very hands-on as a leader. And I think that is a really needed step at this stage of the implementation and the stage of your history. But he is more hands-on, directing day-to-day work, quality control on the implementation. He and I connect way too many times over the weekend. I think it's just a reflection of a district that is still building the muscles and the skills and the expertise in large-scale implementation. Ultimately, in most districts, most superintendents of a district your size, you would be able to take a bit of a step back and more conduct. But I feel in some ways he's conducting and playing some of the instruments as well in this orchestra, as are many others. I know you have this electronically. I'm not going to ask or even try to share this detail, but this is the current layout after the reorganization. You can see the significant, left-hand side is academics, right-hand side is operations. Again, a split that we think makes a lot of sense. As you think about continuing to evolve the central office leadership, a few recommendations. There's a function that is generically referred to data. And obviously there's some elements of data is state reporting, which is why historically data often fell under operations. But data is also the team and the folks who help analyze student achievement, who help crunch numbers to help teachers evaluate which kids are growing and what areas of need they have. And in more and more districts, and our recommendation here, data is more about curriculum and instruction and less about operations, obviously some of both. But we think that the data function should primarily report to curriculum and instruction, given how important that's going to be to the teaching and learning. We think we want to help expand the leadership without adding people by having an expanded role and greater access for directors of elementary and secondary. These are folks we already have. They're very, very talented. And our recommendation is kind of bring them more into the inner circle of senior leadership. We think that they both bring experience and they bring capacity, both of which will be valued. And we also think, if it is possible, adding a deputy superintendent that is academically focused. I know there's been some discussion of whether there should be an operations deputy superintendent, but anything you can do to help build and expand the capacity of very senior leadership focusing on academics and the implementation of these very large efforts would be a very good investment. Where we go from here, at least at this point, our sense is we want to continue as planned. We definitely want to and have brought in those directors of elementary and secondary more into the planning and implementation. We think we are circa 2 months away from finalizing that K-8 curriculum. We think we are about in that same window of being able to finalize or get much closer to finalizing those teaching and learning best practices, and also finalizing the high growth teachers and having a plan that has received some feedback from many folks, including the teachers themselves. So we want to stay the course because the course seems to be working. We definitely expect a lot of the current efforts to start wrapping up this phase of the work in the next couple months, which would then lead us to really planning for very specific rollout of these efforts either in the spring or the fall. So that is where we are. Overall, we are pretty pleased. Wish we were moving faster, but never actually expected to move any faster. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, go ahead and hold up your cards if you have questions. And okay. I have one question, and it is really, can you kind of explain the difference between a deputy superintendent of academics versus a deputy superintendent for operations because operations is what was discussed in the audit, but academics is what you're recommending now. So I'm kind of unclear of what that person would do if they did one of those things.
Sure. So let's talk about the deputy superintendent of academics. So this is a person who morning, noon, and night should wake up thinking about one thing and one thing only, and that is how do we raise achievement of all of your scholars? Now, obviously within that framework, there's going to be efforts around instruction, efforts around curriculum, efforts around using data for that purpose. But it really is to help drive and coordinate and support these very substantial efforts around curriculum instruction and assessment. I think a director of operations tends to be more of I would often define their role as helping to support the principals and the running of the schools. And in theory, so if we took a step back, you could say, hey, principal's job, they too are trying to raise achievement. And so you could argue that either title could both be very much focused on raising achievement. Our experience has been that when you have two things to do, the operations of a school, which includes a lot of discipline, it includes, hey, what do you do when there's a teacher shortage? It includes if you're redistricting or rezoning schools, those things often fall. Those operational elements often fall to that deputy. Those things tend to be both large, overwhelming, and sometimes very time sensitive. And we find that at the end of the year, the teaching, the curriculum, those kind of things got far less energy than the firefighting and some of these special projects. Both are important, but at least it's our sense that you need the more capacity focused on the teaching and learning side.
Mr. Willoughby.
Thank you for asking that question, President Waters, because that his answer kind of made me have to ask another question. So with that explanation, how is that different than the structure that we have currently, where we have a chief academic officer and a chief schools officer?
So I think it reinforces that current structure. What we're seeing is so that the quantity and complexity of the teaching and learning efforts, the academic side of the house, are just so large. And I'm going to say something that I don't want to insult anybody's feelings, but in many ways, the district, and I said this when I met you all a number of months ago, you all are starting from a near standstill as far as district-wide curriculum goes. I mean, yes, you had curriculum, it was very optional. You had all these multiple instructional frameworks, again, very optional, often developed without an enormous amount of feedback from teachers and principals. The amount of work that needs to be done and done well is just enormous. So what we're saying is that the academic side of the house could use another person to help with the heavy lifting. We've already recommended bringing in 3 folks who already have more into that, but we fear that even with that, you could use yet another very senior person. One of the things we got to remember is, we're very committed to a great deal of feedback and a great deal of refinement, which is what good implementation does. That is incredibly time consuming. It is so much easier for a couple people to hold themselves up in central office, create documents, and then ship them out. And we're just seeing a sense of, do you have enough man and woman hours to do all of this? And our sense is more would be helpful.
Seeing no other questions, I will thank you for your time, sir. Thank you for the update and the recommendations. And if you're available for questions at some later point, then we might send some to you.
Absolutely. Send them my way, and I look forward to updating you again in the future.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a good night.
All right. Well, speaking of achievement, I think we have an update from Dr. Yearwood.
Yes, we'll hear from our team, our Chief Schools Officer, Chief Academic Officer, and our Executive Director, Dr. Day, about our current achievement status. We just completed our second iteration of our iReady assessments, and we have some data we'd love to share with you.
So we have some updates for you about climate achievement and enrollment. And we're going to start first with climate, and my colleagues are going to chime in if I forget anything. Remember our vision, mission, and values, and our funnel of how those vision, mission, values, and purpose falls into our strategic plan and our goals and our focus areas and our milestones. And our focus areas are to create high expectations for all scholars, improve core instruction, implement our instructional framework in all schools. So our CSIP goal 2.2% of teachers retained each school year will increase 90% by 26-27. And indicator 2.2, Executive Director of AID, will conduct an annual climate and culture survey. And so these are the results from that survey. So I'll leave that up there for you to look at. I do want to point out some pretty high numbers. I feel informed. This is climate survey from staff. So this is our teachers and our staff. I feel informed about what's going on in my school. Last year it was 68%, and now we're at 70%. We also had an increase from 71 to 74 about my school ensures that schools and classrooms are positive learning environments. We have an increase of 8%. Scholars' voices are heard and respected. An increase in scholars are genuinely well behaved. Scholars feel welcome at school, increase. And then I can't see that very last one, I'm sorry. I can't see it on my screen. The curriculum is challenging and engaging has also gone up. I don't know how to get rid of that little box, I'm so sorry. So we are encouraged that each of these have gone up a little bit from last year. Discipline policies, we heard about discipline in schools, that's gone up 7%, are fair to all scholars from last year to this year, and then provides school culture and climate data, reports periodically to all stakeholders has also gone up. This is climate survey from parents. We also have improvements about feeling informed about what's going on in my student's school. Meeting his or her needs has gone up. Student voices, teachers are good teachers, curriculum is challenging, discipline policies are fair to all. Mr. Moore will be assisting me in a minute. We also have an improvement on school culture and climate data, treating my student with respect. When I have a problem or concern, it's taken seriously, et cetera. And Mr. Moore is going to explain why the last 5 are not on there.
So one of the things that we absolutely wanted to do was capture not only what's been in our traditional surveys, but also what are some things that we're hearing from a trending perspective. So what you will see is back in 2022, there were some questions that we didn't ask. And so we expanded on the types of questions we wanted to be able to ask to our students, to our families. And those questions consisted of, my student can focus on learning in their classroom. As you all heard today, we hear the message. We hear often about the challenges that our teachers are facing. And so we also want to make sure that we're asking our parents and we're asking our students these questions. My student enjoys going to school. My student feels relaxed at school. My student has at least one adult they can talk to at school. So these were some questions that previously we did not articulate in the 2022 school year that we wanted to make sure that we could capture in this school year. So with the support of our NSK-12, our iLearn partnerships, we've then been able to bring all of that together and say, here are some very specific metrics that we want to look at to address how do we improve the satisfaction of our learning environments for our parents as well as for our students and our staff. And so that is why you will see blanks in the 2022 sections. That means that we didn't ask those questions previously, and we wanted to make sure that we could capture that in this iteration.
Thank you. And last but not least, of course, we have our scholar climate survey. So bullying remains about 69–70% from last year to this year. Everyone has a chance to succeed. While it dropped a little bit, it still remains high at 79%. My teachers are good teachers. So you can see that these questions follow the staff and the parent survey questions as well. I think that students in my school are encouraged to do their best every day. My teacher helps me understand. Most of the time my schoolwork is interesting and my opinion is heard and respected at this school. And then as Mr. Moore reported, that last question, I have at least one adult I can talk to at school, was a new question. But we see that the numbers are fairly similar. We, of course, would like the 23 numbers to be a little higher, as we saw in staff and parent, but we will work on those. We now have an achievement update from our colleague, Dr. Day. Do you have any questions about the culture and climate survey as I get the next presentation up?
I have. this is I'm just curious. I noticed the numbers underneath the percentages, I assume, are the number of people that answered each question. So for the teacher survey for this year, were all the questions required where they weren't the previous year? Just noticing that it's the exact same number that answered all the questions there versus the others varied. And so just trying to get a sense of how it was presented to different folks.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question. I will tell you that we had about a 74% completion rate. And so though the questions were, I don't want to say optional, they could complete them all. This was only 74% representation of our responses, which is great. We always strive for 100%, but we felt like 74% was a wonderful turnout. The reason for it being the same across the board, I'm not certain. That is just, not certain. Yeah.
The question about that the students said that they find their schoolwork interesting. I mean, I guess in the last couple of years they have not. Do we typically ask that question? Is it normally that low? Like, what do we think is going on there? Because this is 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade, or all high school. So 5, 8, 9 through 12. Are we concerned about this? I mean, being the parent of a teenager, I can say that my teenager rarely shows that he thinks nothing is interesting unless it involves pizza or, sports.
So one of the things that we have to make sure that we take into consideration is if our students are reporting that it's not interesting to them, we have made a commitment to career and college readiness. So that means that we have to try and find ways to engage them in a manner that is relevant to them. So when we look at the data, and we say, okay, we have a percentage of students who we are not capturing their interest. How can we be innovative? How can we be creative? And how can we establish a system that allows for them to at least have joy in some spaces? Now, some people find math joyous. Some people find English joyous. It depends on the student. Our goal is to make sure that we continue to expand upon our options and availability for the students so that numbers like this continue to go up. And we want it to be more frequent, and we want to really engage our students. So yes, the terminology of interesting is a difficult one to navigate, especially with those, I'm going to say this, the middle school age group. They are our tough ones, right? We have to engage them at high levels. Competing with TikTok is difficult. They have 3-minute snippets, our teachers will tell you. But we want to do everything that we can to capture their interests and to maintain it and hold it, because we do believe that by doing that, we'll increase our academic performance overall.
We're also focusing on this when when Mr. Moore talks about our professional development, our Teach Like a Champion, the things that we do to really strengthen the fact that our principals and our building administrators are our first tier instructional leaders of the building. And so giving them the skills, they have a lot of them, but reinforcing those skills about what great instruction looks like, I think will lift this number up too. But it's not going to be a quick fix.
Well, and I guess I want to highlight, not that having it this low is justifiable in massive ways, but I do think the question, most of the time, I find it interesting. As a student, as a kid, I probably would have said, no, not most of the time, like sometimes. And I could even think about that if I was answering this in relation to any of my college courses, right? I probably would have said as a student, most of the time, do I find it interesting? And I wouldn't have answered yes, right? So I think that's one thing also to think about, like the wording of the question could also lean towards this type of low response too, because of the verbiage of most of the time.
I want to say too that sometimes the answer to that question is not necessarily about the content as much as it is the engagement and the relevance in the instruction, and we're working really hard to improve those. So you can, if you take a subject and make it a lot more fun, a lot more engaging learning activity, the kids are going to enjoy it a whole lot more. So. So thank you, everybody. We are going to look at some of our achievement data, and this is under the CSIP goal of improving our MAP scores by 3%, communication arts and mathematics. We are going to look at our iReady data, and I want to make sure everyone understands that in previous documents or displays we've looked at this, we're looking kind of diagonally because it's year over year. This is the same year, so we are looking straight across. So like when we're looking at our growth, we're looking at like our growth. We have gone from in September, 24% of our students were proficient in reading to 42% now in November, and this is K2, this slide. So if you look at our, one thing I'm very proud of is there's always some concern about first grade, and they have more than doubled on reading and math both, just from September to November being on level. So I think that's pretty impressive. Our math numbers, of course, have gone up as well. You can look at those scores. Our African American scores in math have tripled, percentage of students on level. Of course, we still want to keep moving everyone up. One thing we've really focused on with our principals, and I've asked them to focus on with their teachers, is to keep the growth going. You don't want to get to a point in November or January and say, that was good enough. We've grown enough. We want to keep going, and I know the teachers are working really hard to make sure that does keep happening. As Mr. Levinson talked about, we are looking at our high growth teachers that are really moving a lot of kids, moving them forward. We're doing some observations, talking to principals, talking to teachers, try to see what they're doing that we can replicate throughout the other rooms, other buildings in the district. That is K2. This is 3-8. You can see that the numbers once again have gone up in every category. Our third grade has gone up 9% in math, and they've gone up quite a bit in reading. We have gone up just about every category. We're just continue to keep trying to get better and better. Our middle school principals, sorry, I'm getting this information from Dr. Taylor, who was not able to be here tonight. But our middle school principals have been working with their teachers on students on goal setting. Students are setting goals based on their iReady scores and their iReady lessons that they're doing. And of course, through Dr. Hattie's work, that's very strong effect size, really helps kids grow. And it gives them something to work toward. We need that for kiddos. Talk about our middle school kiddos. My favorite quote about middle school kiddos is they are very confident in their own superiority. Our middle school kiddos know what they need to do. They just got to get motivated to do it. And if they're tracking their own goals, they will definitely get there. I was a middle school teacher back when I had hair and it was kind of not gray. So I love my middle school kids. But we're going to keep moving those kids forward along with our elementary students. If we just keep that steady growth, keep moving forward, we will definitely get there. So some things we are working on, we're doing with our principals during achievement. All year since I first started here, we've talked about we do not want to be a system of schools. We want to be a school system. That's K-12. Dr. Taylor and I work together quite a bit with my director, Mrs. Laverne, to make sure that we're not doing just things separately with elementary and secondary. We do a lot K-12. We do a lot together. The way you give feedback to teachers doesn't change K-12. Good instruction is good instruction. So we're working hard on that. Working with our principals to write CSIPs that are very similar K-12. Same 3 goals. What our schools are focusing on those goals of attendance, discipline, and achievement, they all have sub-goals that are more for their appropriate level or their appropriate building. Things specifically we want them to work towards. Buildings have different needs, and they have different skills. Each month, our directors and executive directors meet with principals to go over their goals. We go through the data every single month. We look at their attendance, their behaviors, what achievement data we have. If we haven't had an iReady assessment, we look at what they're collecting to make sure that we are doing our Tier 1 instruction, following our lesson plans, following our curriculum, those things. That's what we talk about every month. And then our principals also every month share those with their staff. They talk about the data with their staff every month at their faculty meetings. Over the summer, the executive directors and the directors met with our principals. We looked at our MAP EOC data, and we looked at the item analysis, which talks about how students performed on each individual standard. And then we also looked at heat maps, which is, I believe you've seen those. Dr. Wilson shared those with you. You know, the bigger the square, the more percentage it is on the map. The redder it is, the lower we scored. The greener it is, the better we scored. So we're really looking at those individual standards and seeing what instructional practices we can put into place to help improve those. Like the example listed here is we noticed that students were not performing very well on extended response. So we really focused on trying to have students practice that more, do more work with that. Our principals have been provided with monthly or bi-monthly professional development on doing observations in their classrooms, providing specific feedback to our teachers, not just, hey, good job, but really, you did this, it really moved student learning forward. How can we keep doing? How can we keep doing even more, going even further? And then we also worked with our principals to make sure that our new staff, our new teachers, got the support they needed, especially early on, the first beginning of the year, because can be a lonely, scary place when you're a brand new teacher and you've got 30 kids that just, well, hopefully not 30, 20 some odd kids that just love you, but they also want to do what they want to do. So helping them navigate that learning curve. And we are using Teach Like a Champion, Getting Better Faster, as well as other PD pieces to help the teachers, help the principals work with the teachers to get better. Our principals are definitely focused on being instructional leaders. Now, do they deal with behaviors and things like that? Of course, they're working hard on that as well. But they are really trying hard to be instructional leaders for their teachers and to give them that feedback. Any questions about anything?
I guess I have a lot of questions. Okay, Ms. Farrow, thank you.
I don't necessarily have a question per se, but the data that you were going over, where it's showing the number of percentage that were proficient in September and then the number that were proficient this month when they did it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is showing the percent that's proficient of where they would be at the end of the year.
Yes,
So when it shows that there are 38% proficient in fourth grade, that's a measurement that we have 38% of them that are proficient of where they should be in May.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's a good question. My question is kind of like, are data points like the heat map being used to help us develop professional development for teaching those skills to all teachers, or is it more of a like short time corrective action?
I would say that the techniques.
That was a terribly phrased question.
No, I think it was
Sorry.
the data changes year to year. So when you're looking at the specific standards you're looking at would change per year, but how we use them every year and what we look at with teachers every year is not going to change from year to year. And you will see some trends that are multi-year, of course. And I'm sure.
So one of the things that we do with our coordinator group, you have our principals, you have our teachers, but we also have coordinators. Our curriculum coordinators, they dive deeply into that heat map. One of the things that they then do is track over the course of 3 years what have been the item analysis topics that we have historically performed low in. From that respect, what we then do is when coordinators are leading their professional development, they try to target what are those specific standards that we are struggling with, or what are those specific skills that are coming out in the data that then helps drive our professional development. One of the difficulties in that is that there are a lot of standards. There are a lot of areas that we have to address, and then that comes with time and professional development. And so even though we have that platform to be able to do so, it is still very small. So to that end, one of the things we also try to do is work alongside principals to push into PLCs. Several of our coordinators will go to the building. We'll sit with grade level teams, we'll sit with departments and try to work through that data in the building, specifically with a PLC. That's a professional learning community. I'm sorry, I used some alphabet soup. In that professional learning community, what they discuss is how can we specifically get at the standard that we are not performing well in. And so that is how our coordinator group works alongside our principals, and we try to do both the embedded portion. I will say that you all have graciously added instructional coaches, and those instructional coaches are also supporting in that manner. And so we're getting a lot more done, but still have quite a bit to do.
When will the next test be?
January. Okay. And with that data, we plan to additionally just action plan, respond to the data, and move more kids. As Ms. Farrell spoke to, 38% of our students, if you're looking at that data, are already proficient. That means we still have over 60%, 70% roughly to get to. And I think that's important because what we don't want to do, we know that our standards are going to get more rigorous, that is going to get more complex, and we want to make sure that we keep all of our students at proficient or advanced. So we got a lot of work to do to make sure that we can get to those students who are not there yet. I say yet intentionally.
So when they take the iReady in January, is that the last one, or is there one more after that?
They'll have one more after.
Okay, good, thanks.
What you see happening there is we look at the predictive value of the iReady test. By the time you take the fourth iteration, typically we see either a 10% gain or 10% loss. So that will give us a pretty good predictor of where we are going to land with our map test, and that's why we're pushing to see the numbers increase. As we looked at iReady last year, we saw a very strong correlation to the map test. Where we ended on our last iteration, that's basically where we landed with our map test. So now we are driving or encouraging our schools or teachers or academic to really pay attention so that we can raise the bar and we can see increases in scores. Right now, the data is telling us where we're going to be trending. We have to raise it. That's what we're trying to do.
And I will say too that a lot of our schools are treating the iReady more like the map assessment. Even Dr. Taylor shared that some of the middle schools are changing their bell schedule so they have more time to do the test. Same thing for elementary, treating it more like the map. So it's, you know, giving that because it is very important.
That testing in January, that's going to be happening, or I shouldn't say testing, but collection of data, right, with your iReady. Timeline-wise of January, where is that happening?
There's a window, so it's essentially the month.
Okay.
We give them several. We're not going to test them the day they come back from break.
Yeah.
If that's what you're asking, that's not happening. We're going to come in. One of the things, just to talk, what is typical process? Come in and you revisit procedures, classroom expectations, and just being back in school. That is foundational. It's essential. And then you'll have several weeks of this window being open for them to get to some instruction, get school back under their feet, and then we can see where they are. One of the things that we have to be able to do is maintain the fact that we still have to move forward. So once we get back routines and procedures, we'll still get back into some instruction. We'll get back into this assessment because that is then driving instructional practices for our teachers. They use that data, they go into their data teams, they look at the areas or the gap areas with regard to performance, and then they respond based on it.
May I ask just follow? Okay. I ask just because would it be reasonable then for us to potentially, if we do see a dip, just know that due to the fact that we did have a break, that kids are, you know, getting back into routine, getting back into like where they were at the lesson and things of that nature. Like if we did see a dip in that iReady,
I don't want to see a dip, but
no,
it can happen. We are aware that it can happen. But one of the things we are optimistic of is the fact that our students will maintain and hold and retain the information from this semester into the second. And so that is, I'm gonna lean on that one.
Yes, totally leaning on that, right? I guess I asked mainly is I wanted to future project just in case if our community is here listening tonight, and then if that thing that we don't want to happen does happen, like there's a reasonable space for it.
Thank you all very much.
You're very welcome. There's more.
There's more.
There's more. You can thank us more later.
Sorry, you got us.
Okay, I just
This one is a short one.
Yes, it is. But also very essential when we're talking about how does it impact our academic environments and the things that we are doing. I'm gonna stop talking until I get in front of the mic.
Sorry. Okay. I'm trying to get this guy to go away. Here you go, Mr. Moore.
All right, and so one of the things that I wanted to speak to is a little bit about our current enrollment. When we are talking about academic environments, frequent questions that come up are things like, what is our free and reduced lunch population? What is our classroom size? How many students do we have per building? And while we won't jump into a lot of that information, one of the things that I will say is that from a population perspective, we're relatively stable. And so with some of that stability comes our ability to then be responsive with regard to some of those factors, especially when we get into our FTE discussions. So we see here that we're about 18,000 students still. And so we're still staying relatively stable. And we continue to also encourage our families to fill out, if you'll see, we're at 44.6% free and reduced lunch. We're still encouraging them to fill out those meal applications. The stories that are taking place within our buildings, the feedback that we're getting, we know that there's a struggle out there, and we want to be able to make sure that we're encouraging our families to fill out those applications, because we believe that that will also support some of the works and efforts that are taking place in our buildings. Another thing that we want to make sure that we're keeping up with so that we can also be responsive with regard to FTE needs. And in the last year, you would have realized that we added or expanded the number of English language teachers that we had requested, as well as special education teachers. And that's due to a small increase in the numbers that we're seeing here as well. And so while our population is staying relatively stable, we are seeing some of our more EL and special education environments gradually increase in the raw number and slightly in that percentage. And so we're aware of that, and we continue to action plan and make sure that we dialogue with our departments about what does this mean for us and how can we be responsive to that need as well. And that is it. See, short and sweet. Short and sweet. Any questions in relation to that?
That was the best one. There's no question.
Questions are good.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. We'll keep it rolling with more reports. We've got Dr. B here to talk about the balanced scorecard with Dr. Yearwood.
Yes, we're here to talk about our balanced scorecard, and we'll begin our first slide up on inspiring greatness with intentionality. We talk about our theme of inspiring our scholars, and how do we do that? Well, we look at the layers that are presented here as a pathway to student success. The district is using to at least improve achievement and accomplish its mission, vision, and values. So again, everything ties together in terms of how everything, the vision, mission affects the strategic plan, that affects development of goals, that affects focus areas and milestones. Of course, this has been mentioned. We know our mission, vision, and our values. This is very important to keep this in front of us. And then we have a 5-year strategic plan for continuous improvement. The plan actually, it guides our work towards achieving growth and ultimately our vision and mission. Within the strategic plan, there's 3 main goals, especially for next year, dealing with growth, innovation, and achievement, being able to get our scholars to school, keep them in class, and catch them up with and advance them further. Okay. Next, we have our focus areas that was mentioned to help us drill down to specific areas within our plan's goals and help guide our work. Okay. We have our milestones. The milestones are segmented into different areas. We have a governing team, the board, education, myself. We also have the district leadership, and we also have school leadership and the steering committee. These are very, very important as far as the actual work is concerned. These are the action items being implemented by various levels within the organization to address the focus areas and accomplish our 3 main district goals. Okay. As we look at accountability, when we look at accountability from national, state, and local level, at the national level, we look at assessments, data collection, of course, federal reports. At the state level, it's the assessments, and we look at MSIP, which is our data collection points, and then, of course, the state, district, and school annual performance reports, and, of course, our state and district report card. At the local level, we look at data collection, and most importantly, we are now looking at a balanced scorecard. So again, being able to keep track of where we are through that process. Over the years, and with each iteration of the district strategic plan, the district has basically created a public scorecard for both the district and each building. And these scorecards are used to display our progress towards achieving our goals and ultimately our vision and mission. But with the new district strategic plan, which was adopted last year, we are also revisiting our scorecard. The revision will include a renewed and more deliberate focus on growth. So here we see our balanced scorecard. This is also one of the milestones, A7, where we talk about adopt measures on the CPS balanced scorecard. At the last board meeting, I spoke in November about part 1. We looked at the financial and the internal business perspective. We now are here to talk, in addition to that, the part 2, which talks about innovation and learning, and of course, our customer perspective. So remember last November, we spoke about our financial aspect of the scorecard. We spoke to, basically the thresholds, which are on the far right side, and making sure that our numbers or percentages are staying within the green. Mrs. MacArthur did a great job of speaking to that. We also spoke to our internal business perspective when we looked at attendance, we looked at out of school suspensions, we looked at iReady data, for example, or the threshold for attendance was 5%. A district is at 10.3%, so we're beyond that expected threshold. We see that negative 10% is our decrease in out of school suspensions. We had negative 38 at elementary, negative 42 at secondary. And our iReady, now this is where the work is. The threshold is at least 5% growth expected, but in reading we're at 0.4 and math at 2.5 overall. So we have work to do there. At the news scorecard, we talk about innovation and learning perspective. So here we are able to visualize. This is, I call it the new portion of our balanced scorecard. This is where we are actually looking to visualize what is happening with our district or school and scholars as far as their MAP data is concerned. So looking at literacy, well, first of all, it's important that we must understand the data. We must know the data, but must truly understand it. So putting it in a GPA format allows us to actually see where we are landing. So when we look at this slide, we see that if you're in different categories, if you're below basic, it's 1.99 and below. If you're basic, you're 2 to 2.9 and so on. And we're also looking at measuring literacy, which is everything humans do to communicate and make meaning of the world through reading, writing, speaking, listening, and so on. So contributing to literacy should be almost every core area. It's not just reading, but we should have input from every area because you have to read in social studies, you have to read in science classes, and so on. And then numeracy, everything humans do to understand ideas, reason, and transfer learning from one context to the other. And these definitions came about with our coordinators, working with our teachers, and at some point we will see these actually articulated more in policy. But it's important to understand, when we look at the GPA, for example, we see a GPA on the left side of a scholar that's 1.92, which means that they fell in the below basic range, but they fell in the higher end of the below basic range. We see right above that, the district GPA was 2.82, and the campus GPA was 2.92. What this tells us is that overall as a district, in literacy, we are falling in the basic range overall, and as a campus, we are also falling in the basic range, although at the higher end. The expectation is that as we look at these GPAs from year to year, we should see a growth, a minimum of a year's worth of growth within the year's time. We want more than a year's growth, but we should see a minimum growth that way. And then another aspect of the scorecard deals with our growth chart. As we look at these scatter plots, the blue dots represent our elementary school, the yellow dots represent our secondary schools. As we go from left to right, that shows how many are growing. It shows that our scholars are growing at the right rate. And as we go from bottom to top, that deals with achievement. How many are actually mastering? How many are actually in the, we call it the proficiency ranges and so on. The one with the red circle around it, that's our district average. That tells us where we are as a district. So the green area is good. It shows that we are growing, but again, we should be moving along to the far right. And of course, the expectation is that we're moving up into the blue area in our mastery level. Notice there's one elementary school, one middle school there already in yellow that we have identified. That's in reading. When we look at math, again, we're seeing the middle schools actually making more growth. And so they're moving into, there are more of them in the green area in math. And I think that's because of our ramped up efforts that we've done in math because of our, where we were academically, and we're seeing the payoff there. The one in red that's circled on the math, that's where our district is. And of course, as we go up in blue, those are the schools that are demonstrating more mastery. So we're seeing sort of an increase in those numbers, which is very encouraging. So as we look at our balanced scorecard, there are certain thresholds. Now, because of our data being embargoed, we can't really show that just yet. When we will get it and we'll be able to demonstrate it. But the expectation is that we should be seeing a threshold or growth of 3.0 when it comes to our overall GPA in literacy, in mastery. And then as we look at our academic growth, we should see a minimum of 0.20. So Dr. B, anything you need to chime in with there, sir? Can't hear you. You're muted. You're muted. I'm sorry.
I'm muted.
Okay. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. I've never regretted not having a hat in my head, but today I do, because I really want to tip my hat off to all of you. I'm absolutely impressed with the governing team, with your insights, with your questions. So kudos to all of you for really caring passionately about the scholars at CPS. They're very lucky to have the 8 of you there as their leaders. So as Dr. Yearwood has been very eloquently explaining, the expectation is when every scholar to become the best school district in the state, the expectation is every scholar is going to get to the 3.0 or above is the minimum as far as the achievement is concerned. And as far as growth is concerned, the minimum expectation is every scholar makes a year or more than a year's growth in a year's time. And if you look on the graph before, you can actually see some schools that are producing growth in amazing numbers because of the outstanding teachers that Mr. Levinson was pointing out earlier that you have, who are able to produce growth in the order of 0.2, as Dr. Yearwood said, 0.4, and in numeracy even as high as 0.6. So this is outstanding in terms of what is the level of expertise that exists in the district. So I'll turn it back to Dr. Yearwood.
Yes. So again, thank you, Dr. B. This is should be our last slide, I believe. We just heard about the survey that was taken with our staff, our parents, and our students. So as we look at the survey that was done with our parents, there were 9 items. And when we looked at our metric, we wanted to see, based upon what we surveyed in 22, they're the same questions, and 23, how much improvement did we see overall in that survey? And the threshold is at 15%. We're getting very close. We're at 11% growth in the positive responses that we've seen in that parent survey. The only troubling one, and I think we had some discussion about this, is in the student survey growth. Notice that their growth, there were 12 items that they were asked. It was only about a 1% overall improvement in the questions we're asking. So again, we expect 15%. So we know, looking at the data, we have some work to do in terms of student growth, what the perceptions that they answered. And of course, in the district staff survey, there were 8 items that were asked based upon the data Mr. Moore had just presented. And the growth factor, the positive growth that we saw was at 15%, which does meet our threshold. We want to go past this. We want to improve upon this. But this gives us basically a metric for us to shoot for. You know, we give the surveys, we get the results, and we stop there. Now we are saying, no, we want to improve. We want to increase where we are. And this is but one metric that allows us to move forward and sets a goal up for us there. Dr. B, you want to finish off?
So the key idea here to the governing team and the community of Columbia is, if you looked at the previous iterations of the scorecard, you have you have hundreds of thousands of measures we have done, not just in Columbia, but across the nation. So the concept of a balanced scorecard is to take 5 to 7 key performance indicators on the 4 perspectives: the finance, the operations or internal business, the learning and innovation, and the customer satisfaction, particularly of the students, of the families, and staff. So when you think of those 3 as the primary customers, what are the key performance indicators? And if you can notice just on this particular slide, you realize a lot of the achievement you've been talking about for the last half hour on iReady and in MAP is very closely as a leading indicator, tracking with how the students are feeling and perceiving school. So this is something we know now, and the more we can engage with that particular indicator to get them more engaged, feel more interested in school beyond pizzas, President Waters, is really what gets us to really say, yeah, this is engaging work, this is exciting work, and it's connected to their interests, connected to their lives. You'll see the achievement starts to soar as they see they have a clear goal, as Dr. Day was referencing with Dr. Taylor saying, yes, we are looking to do more goal setting. So focus on a few key performance indicators or KPIs and hone in on where the problems are and what can we do to impact and improve the performance. I'll stop right there. Thank you. Thank you all so much, and great to visit with all of you, the board and Dr. Yearwood and colleagues.
So at this time, we stop and ask any questions. Oh, Mr. Willoughby.
When it comes to that threshold and trend of having a 15% increase, are we talking about a 15% increase overall, or are you talking about a 15% increase of what is available to grow in? Does that question make sense?
So that's a great question, Mr. Willoughby, soon to be Dr. Willoughby, I'm sure. So yes, this is talking about what is the growth relative to the room to grow. And the expectation is, of course, the room to grow is to get to 100. But when you look at what are best practices nationally, internationally benchmarked, when you think about our industry in K-12 education, 15% is an excellent threshold to get to in terms of room to grow. Does that clarify, Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question. I just took a bite of a snack, darn it. The 0.2 for growth, is that the number that we've decided is that a year's growth? Like 0.2 growth, does that correlate with a year? Or like, I don't understand the point, like what is 0.2? Where does it come from?
Yeah, 0 is really the year. When you look at the vertical line, as Dr. Yearwood said, for example, in the literacy example, you see the red circle is close to the 0 line. That is making a year's growth, but that's not going to cut it in terms of where our scholars are. So this is, as Dr. Yearwood said, making more than a year's growth in a year's time. So this is trying to stretch the organization to say, yes, the minimum every scholar should make is maintain their MAP GPAs on literacy and numeracy, but that's not going to be enough when you have too many scholars not yet meeting the 3.0 mark. So the 0.2 is very consistent to get us to say, we want to have that as the minimum expectation for all of our scholars and campuses. And kudos to them if they can get to 0.4 and 0.6, as some of these campuses and scholars have got. And there are scholars who have even got, as you look at the graph here, going as high as sometimes even 3.0. So 0.2 is a reasonable expectation to have for making more than a year's growth in a year's time, President Waters.
Okay, I think I understand. It's a portion of kind of that GPA.
Yes.
Okay, it's a fifth of one number.
Yes, it's
I gotcha.
more than, so if they maintain it as great, you want them to do more than that. So you get them quickly caught up to go into the blue area rather than being in the green zone.
I gotcha. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.
You too. Okay, we'll next have a nutrition services report. And it says Ms. MacArthur, but I saw Ms. Fulham. So I'll let you guys tag team it if you want.
Yes, Lena Fulham, who is our lovely Director of Nutrition Services, is going to come up and help me with her programmatic report here tonight. I'll hit on some financial stuff, but she's mainly going to drive here related to, just a reminder to everyone, our Nutrition Services Fund is self-supporting. It is its own fund separate from our operating fund. When we refer to our operating fund that we talk to a lot, we talk about our general fund and our teachers fund together. Well, nutrition services is separate, a fund from that. The revenues that come in to support that fund are from all the expenditures, so all the salaries and benefits of the nutrition services employees, all the food costs are all supported within the revenues from food sales and from our federal revenues that come into that fund. So, Ms. Fulham, you can take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I think it's important to tell you what our programs are, to remind you of what they are, and also tell you about some of our interests that we believe is beneficial for CPS. Of course, we have the breakfast and lunch. Everyone knows that. We also sometimes will have the after-school snack program. There's a big one at West Middle at this point in time. We have Seamless Summer. That is basically specific schools who are 50% of free and reduced eligible enrollment in their schools, so they can participate in all free meals over the summer. Let's see, we have, I can barely read my notes, I apologize. Preschool snacks and meals, we feed our preschool as well. Donated foods. When we talk about donated foods, basically that is a program that helps to keep the price of our meals down. We got this year about $821,000 in food. So it's not money, it's kind of like monopoly money that we put towards food. And that helps to keep the price of meals down. We have our community eligibility provision program. We have 7 schools in that, and that means that they all get free breakfast and lunch as well. And what that's based on is our direct certification numbers. We get a download from the state of Missouri, that tells us exactly who is on SNAP, TANF, who are homeless, migrant, or there's one more category, I'm forgetting what it is. But anyway, we get a download from the state that tells us exactly who those are, and those are categorically eligible students. So if we have a certain percentage of those students in a particular building that is over 40%, then they are actually eligible to participate in community eligibility provision. However, we do make our mark a little bit higher simply because we have to go without certain amounts of monies in order to run those programs. So we only get paid reimbursement and we get free reimbursement. There is no reduced category, and then so therefore we have to live without certain amounts of money, and we have to make it work with the amount that we do make. Then we have, we do catering for several organizations, one of them being at the Douglas Park. We actually didn't do it at Douglas Park, we split it out in 2 different areas last summer, but typically it's in Douglas Park. Then we have Farm to School. We're big on Farm to School. We share an individual with the Columbia Center for Urban Agriculture next door. They pay about 2/3 of her salary and we pay 1/3. And what she does is she goes around to our Title I schools, at least 7 of them, and then 2 Mile Prairie, which is not a Title I school. And she teaches 17 lessons to the 3rd and 5th graders. And then they also take a field trip over at the center over at CCUA, okay?
We would like to increase that because we were also having a lot of farm to school items on our garden bar, but we haven't had that opportunity to reinstate those things, status post-COVID. Let's see, we continue to be interested in waste diversion. Right now, we're trying to partner with CACC on a grant with the city to get a mechanical composter. We already recycle in our kitchens, but we also know that we're the biggest trash makers because our cafeterias have a lot of trash in them, obviously. And so we want to work on curtailing that through composting. And composting itself is a very slow process, and when we tried to outsource picking up the compost, it was just cost prohibitive. And during COVID, when we were working on that, obviously the grant ran out during COVID, so we couldn't continue that particular process that we were doing in the cafeterias at the time. And it was cost prohibitive. But what we have discovered that there are machines that do this within 24-hour periods, and the culinary chefs are working with their students to, hopefully, if we get the grant, to compost their items and kind of get an idea of what that looks like for us and see if that's something that the district wants to move towards. Lastly, we have Provision 2 schools. There's about 4 of them in our district. They get free breakfast. And what that's based on is the fact that they have not only high direct certification students, but also application students. They're not high enough to be CEP, but we can at least get them some free breakfast. Okay.
Yeah, so this next slide shows our historical perspective of our student participation. Of course, the higher our participation is, the higher our revenue is going to be. So you can see there back to 2017-18, we're over 1.7 million, or 1.7 million meals served during lunch and breakfast, over 700,000. You can remember that we dropped off there in 2021. That's when we were virtual, but 21-22. Reminder that was when all of our meals were free during the coming out of COVID, and so our participation was a lot higher. And then 22-23 was the most recently ended fiscal year, right under the 1.7 million. So we're still working towards getting back up to those numbers pre-COVID for our participation.
Yes, we are. And so our goals in my department are always to increase participation and maintain financial solvency. Right now we are struggling against, decreasing participation at this moment in time, but we're hoping to get it back up because we went from all free meals to now families are having to pay if they are not free. So we always work on working on our finances and fighting inflation, because we all know what it looks like at the grocery store. The same is true for us. The promotion of farm to school, as I mentioned earlier, we do want to get some more of those items on our garden bar. Our field supervisors are working on that steadily at this moment in time. And then, of course, reducing our carbon footprint. So if we can at all, recycle or compost or somehow divert our trash, it's a very expensive expense in the district, then that would be great. We would love to see that.
I'm going to jump back real quick because we skipped over our a la carte sales slide, which our a la carte sales are in our secondary schools are very important to our revenue. Those do help support our sales, but those are the things like when our secondary students can go through the line and buy bottles of water or a bag of chips or something that's not a full eligible meal. But these items do help support. This number does only include a la carte sales. There are some other non-program revenue that we do include in our nutrition services funds, like she was talking about, like some snacks, and like our board meals are paid for. We transfer money from our operating fund into the nutrition services fund to pay for stuff like that. But also, you can see there where it dropped off in 17-18. That's because we have implemented a pizza program that used to be recorded as a la carte sales and now can be served as an eligible lunch, which is so it's recorded as program revenue rather than a la carte sales. But we are excited to see that those a la carte sales do continue to rise in 22-23, coming back out of COVID, because that does help support those additional expenditures when we have that extra revenue coming into our nutrition services fund.
Okay, and then some of our challenges are that we are re-educating our families about filling out free and reduced applications. So therefore, what that does is that it creates quite a bit of debt for our reduced and our full price families. The rising cost of operations, and mostly in wages and benefits for employees. Not as much as groceries as it is one might think, but mostly in benefits, one of those things that grows unchecked, it seems. Federal and state regulations are always a challenge because with every reauthorization, which comes every 5 years from USDA, there are there's new language and law that we must adhere to. And they give us a certain amount of time to adhere to it. Then returning to full price and reduced price meals, that's been a challenge. I do have on good authority that Missouri is working on trying to get universal meals. I hope that they work on that pretty quickly because it would be very nice for all students in Missouri, much like many the 10 that are already in the United States at this moment in time. It's going to take time, obviously, because they just started that work. Employee recruitment is still under strain. So we are readily always recruiting employees and trying to keep them. The work is hard, and so a lot of people don't like to do it because it is hard. It's on your feet all day long. And we already said employee recruitment. Unpaid meal balances, again, a direct relation to the fact that 2 years we had free reduced families, and a lot of our families don't understand filling out an application every year. They also, some of them don't understand that if they're directly certified, how they became free, and they just assume they're free every single year. And so then when I send notices, they think, oh, that's not me. You know, so that is a big challenge for us, is to try and keep them educated about what they're supposed to do each year. And then continuing our integration with our software. That hasn't been the most stellar of projects that we've taken on. And we'll talk about that some more. And I'm actually going to have to look at this slide because I cannot see my notes. It's very tiny on here. So anyway, what has happened is in 2022, April of 2022, CyberSoft is our new software, not new anymore, obviously. And we took that on, and we have been gone through 2023, 2024. Obviously, we're now here. And what has been happening is the data is bad, essentially. And so we're constantly having to follow after our software company to keep the data correct. And we just happen to stumble across these things, or sometimes a parent will call us and give us a heads up, and then we have to continually, from day one, straighten out their financial discrepancies or their free and reduced discrepancies. And so it's been a big struggle. We were supposed to have moved on to inventory and production and menu planning, but when we did start that with just one school, because we know what happens when we do it 100% with all of our schools, we did it with one school, and we had to back up because it was too cumbersome. So we're finding that to be a big challenge for us. Is there anything else did I miss anything else up there? The reason we went with this particular system is because we wanted to get away from the modular system that we have outgrown. And what that does is it requires our techs, our technology techs, to go and load something on our machines constantly. So we really wanted a web presence, and that's what this software offered. And so apparently they have a great reputation for modular software, but they don't necessarily have a good reputation for the online presence. We're going to move on. Okay, thank you. The things that we do well is that we do efficiently feed children every day. You saw what our numbers look like and how many students we feed each day, or actually you will get to see that. I don't think we've seen that yet. Farm to school efforts, we do well. Financial accountability, we typically are in the black. The only time that we have ever hit the red was when we were during COVID, and that was when we had to keep all of our employees working because you can't hire 150 people out of the blue, so we kept them working. We also do our free and reduced applications very well. That is better data. Our free and reduced information is better data than census data. So a lot of people use that for grant reasons here in the district and all over Columbia. Nutrition education, we have great nutrition educators, and we, since our supervisors who are also the nutrition educators are working in the kitchens, we recently teamed up with Extension, MU Extension, so that they could help us with our nutrition education, because we don't want that falling by the wayside because we don't have enough staff. And then sustainability efforts. We're just very interested in that. So you'll hear that theme from me often.
So the next slide shows our fund balance. Again, as a reminder, this is a separate fund, separate from our operating fund. And so this is a nutrition services historical fund balance history looking back for the last 6 years there. You can see going into 2020, we did have a fund balance that was around $1 million. And so they were self-sustaining. We did have to transfer some funds, so that you see the transfer in that is coming from the operating fund in 1920 and 2020-21. Again, Lena mentioned we did continue to pay our employees, including our nutrition services employees, while we were doing virtual learning. And so we had that expense while we did not have any revenue coming in. So we didn't have any of our paid meals coming in because obviously we weren't in school. And then we also didn't, when meals were free in 2021 and 21-22, we didn't have any of that paid meal. We only had the federal revenue coming in. But then also in 21-22, we did get some federal stimulus money. So you can see our revenues were a lot higher in the 21-22 school year. So that was some additional supplemental federal funds that were in there. And so we did have an ending balance in June of 2022 of 2.4 million. And then the most recently ending fiscal year of 22-23, you can see we're slightly over, our expenditures were slightly over our revenues, about $400,000, but we still do have an ending balance in our nutrition services fund, about $2 million. And again, just like in our operating fund, our salaries and benefits, like Lena said, is our largest portion of the expenditures in there. And as we're continuing to put money in, into those hourly salaries, because our nutrition services workers are some of our lowest paid employees, we want to remain competitive. And it's, as she mentions, one of the challenges is to continue to try and recruit individuals to come in there. And so it's really difficult when you can go to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or whatever and make, over $15 an hour, to try and make sure that we want to continue to put money into those salary schedules for our own nutrition services, food service employees, so that we have people in those positions as well. And another piece of that is benefits. And so a lot of her, historically, her positions were part-time positions, and so we didn't have to pay benefits for those. But she's been creative, since it's harder to recruit, and to try and make sure some of those people have full-time work. So that also means paying benefits for those employees as well. And so that's a continued increase. And so we've been really tried to make a commitment to make sure that we're continuing to value those employees as well. And so that just means rising expenditures in that fund, just like in our operating fund. But again, she's very good and pretty diligent about really scrutinizing her costs and trying to make sure that we're really diligent about rising costs and deferring some maintenance and making sure we're meeting our needs in that fund as well. And then our lunch debt was also something that we have mentioned was a challenge. So even pre-COVID, we had some rising debt, you can see. And then between 17-18 and then 21-22, we weren't incurring additional debt. So in 21-22, we wrote off the $18,000 that was there previously, because that was before, when our meals were still free. And then we had quite a bit of debt accumulate last year to the 22-23 fiscal year, as those meals were no longer free. And then that was written off. That $91,000 is what was turned over to our collection agency in August of 2023. And then the next slide just shows, just since that time, so over $90,000 was written off in August. And so just since August, and now as of, a couple weeks ago, when we were pulling together the numbers for this presentation, you can see our balances were already up to almost $70,000 in negative balances. And you can see the breakdown of the amounts there, but the amounts that accumulated into that amount. But just in the last 3 months, that's why it's a continual education process, to make sure that we're going through to try and collect those. Again, for those people that can't afford it, to make sure they're filling out applications for the free and reduced applications, but also a lot of this is contributed as from people that actually can, are paid meals. And so we have a collection process, as you can see on the next slide, of all the different process and recommendations that we go through to continually remind individuals of those balances.
And what you'll notice too, the 25 and the 50, when you get above $50, statistically, those families are not going to pay, unfortunately. And so what we do is we do a lot of notification. So even if a family owes 1 cent, we are sending out a notification at least once a week in terms of a phone call. And I believe there's also a text and an email with that. And then I also send an email that tells them exactly where they are financially with us. So if they owe a penny, that's 2 notifications typically on the same day. And then if they owe over $25, they get 2 notifications. They get one on Wednesday as well. So they get a written one from me telling them exactly how much it is, and they get several phone calls throughout the week to let them know. And a lot of times they'll just get online and either pay or give us a call and figure out what's going on. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't, and that's when we get in trouble. So then we have to send folks to our newest collection agency. And when they're at $50 over, we do that semi-annually. We also have parents acknowledge at the beginning of the year that this is a possibility, that if you are owing them money at a certain point in time, that you will actually be going to collections. And we made sure that our collection agency is someone who is kind to our families, because we know that we have to continue to work with them. We are not going to cut them off in any way. Obviously, we feed our kids every single day, whether they owe money or not. So anyway, we send them to a collection agency, and then we assess some of the balances for lawsuit. If you're over $250, which is easy to do if you're eating both breakfast and lunch. It doesn't seem possible, but it does happen. So, and then if you owe less, then it just rolls from year to year.
Lena said something I want to reiterate too. Like, no one is turned away when they come through the lunch line, and no one's offered an alternative meal. You don't have to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a cheese sandwich or anything. Anyone that comes through, if you have an eligible meal, they're still served, and that's why some of the debt does continue to accumulate there. And so, like she said, we just partnered with a new collection agency starting in August of last year, but also we aren't turning over. When we look at what we're turning over to the collection agency, it's not, we have historically written off internally those debts that are for free and reduced, who have subsequently qualified for free and reduced lunch after they've accumulated debt and then subsequently filled out an application. And so we write those off, but it is something that we do charge the operating fund, because the Department of Elementary and Education does not allow us to charge that to the Nutrition Services Fund. And so when we write off those things, that is something that we charge to the operating fund. Questions?
I have one question. When I had kids in school, I could write a check or I could pay online. Are those still the options? And are there any additional options like PayPal or, God forbid, Venmo or anything?
Credit cards, that's the additional option that we have. So if you want to pay online, obviously it's credit card. We don't take e-checks, but definitely checks and obviously cash. Yeah. So they can pay at their school, they can pay online, they can pay in our office. So there's several ways for them to pay their bill. You're welcome.
Ms. Fulham, I'm going to repeat some things from last week in our meeting, just to make sure that it's also heard here. When it comes to the software integration issues, it's not a user issue. It's not our end. It's not our staff. It's that the software just isn't working the way that we thought it would when it came from the company.
Yes, that is correct. The company's been working really hard, but it's like they don't know school foods all of a sudden, even though they're a reputable company. Right now I had to argue with them about CEP and how our numbers are incorrect, and that will reflect incorrectly in our revenue. So if you don't have our numbers correct, it's not going to tell us how much we've made or not made. So yeah.
And then when it comes to that, financial sustainability, that you are very independent and you keep the department solvent. when it comes to tax dollars that go to food, all that it's not, none of it is local taxes. It's just state and federal taxes that is distributed across the nation and in the state as it is given to all other schools, correct?
That is correct, right. And we don't allow à la carte if a child owes any money. So yes, that is correct. And the only local money is the amount a child pays for a meal. Yep, so that is correct.
And so I think that's, that's an amazing thing in the fact that we have a nutrition services department that's able to be as solvent as it is and also be in the black, right? And do that very repetitively. And like the one blip being, or those 2 years during COVID, as we were kind of responding and having a lot of changes. And on that, I don't know if we had the chance to do this, and I just want to say thank you for all that you did and your department did during COVID, because that was a crazy time. And you made sure that our kids were getting fed and families were also getting food, and an insurmountable leap, and y'all did it. And just thank you for leading in the helm on that and making that happen for our families and kids.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I have a great team.
Yes, I do. It's a big deal.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions for me? Again, thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to go over our budget priorities next. This is Ms. MacArthur.
So you guys have some homework in front of you. At each one of your spots, I printed out our budget parameters and our budget priorities from the 23-24 budget book. Again, nothing has been updated. All this is a printout of what was in the budget book for last year. And so your homework between now and January, when we have the kind of kickoff to our budget season, and the first thing is to approve the budget parameters for the 24-25 school year. And for you guys to, if you have any suggestions or edits or anything for our guidelines and guiding parameters kind of to guide our budget process for the 24-25 school year, is to email me so we can incorporate those. And so when I'm presenting them in January, we can have a fully encompassing list of parameters and priorities to guide our work for the 24-25 budget, because we will start, once we approve those parameters and priorities, we start having our FTE discussions with our building and department leaders and our schools, and we start really accumulating those lists of requests from year to year as we start the budget process. Does anybody have any questions? I know we talked a lot about this with our group at Finance Committee the other night, but if anyone wants to, if there's any additional questions from the board members or anybody, I would welcome to take questions.
I think Blake wanted to chime in, and Blake's the Finance Committee chair.
No, yeah, Heather, we talked about, we either said the 18th or the 20th for long range to get you notes. Is that a very similar kind of timeline you would like us to? And the reason why I asked that is that obviously, because I say long range, sorry, I meant finance. Finance is meeting January 3rd.
Yes.
Because
like
the first is a
schools
Monday.
Come back, or kids come back to school.
So for us to be able to also look at y'all's recommendations that are not on the committee, would that be a good deadline for us, or would you give us some more grace?
I would love that, because we do have our Christmas break coming up here starting on December 21st, and I would love to be able to take some time off between Christmas and New Year's. And New Year's Day just happens to be on a Monday, so this board meeting and Finance Committee is the earliest possible dates it could ever be, starting in January. So if you could get that to me before the end of next week, that would be fabulous. The 22nd, next Friday is the 22nd.
22nd. Okay, due by the 22nd. Do you want us to send our suggestions to just you, or to you and Mr. Willoughby?
You can send them to me, and then I'll accumulate everything prior to Finance Committee.
Is that fine?
Yep.
Okay. Great.
And I'm willing to take them as soon as you have them. You don't have to wait to the last day, and then I can incorporate each one individually. I'd rather do one at a time than 12 all at one time. But yes, and I I always say this every year, but I really appreciate the collaborative effort at Columbia Public Schools. Again, this is part of our strategic plan to really work together collaboratively to build our budget together as a school district and tie those to our goals. And so this is really the kickoff to that budget process to make sure that all flows properly. So I really appreciate your help with this.
It is our pleasure. All right, thank you for that. We will make sure and get you any suggestions for the budget parameters by January 22nd, if not before. December 22nd. December 22nd. I know what we're talking about. I just wrote down the wrong number. Okay. We have reached the consent agenda portion of our meeting. Are there any items that anyone would request to remove for separate consideration this month? Of course, now that I remember to ask, there are none. No, don't make one up. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is unanimously adopted. How about that? Okay, and we'll go on. We have one item of unfinished business. This will be a roll call vote. It is consideration of the policy for second read and final approval of policy BBF. Is there a motion to approve policy BBF?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say the reason why this is in old business is because Mr. Willoughby requested that the policy committee review, and he gave a series of 4 issues, and I'll just summarize those really quick. He had an issue with the duty of care, and he wanted to ensure that the members use available facts and independent judgment to make their decisions. He wanted to include that the board not divulge confidential information. He wanted to include that the board accept the will of the majority and that the board arrives informed, and the policy committee reviewed his concerns and determined that the concerns were addressed in the language as written. So it was the belief of the majority of the policy committee that it should be returned back to the board without changes.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote. Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Harper.
Okay. Ms. Hayes? Yes. Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Ms. Farrow?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Ms. Waters?
Yes. Okay, the policy has been adopted. That's policy BBF. We'll now move on to the consideration of the collective bargaining parameters. And we're going to let Ms. Holtz do a presentation, and then we will have a roll call vote to a motion and a vote to approve them.
During the winter, prior to the expiration of the existing agreement, the Board of Education directs the administration to engage in respectful negotiations with representatives from the Columbia, Missouri chapter of the NEA. The 2024 session will begin in January. This year's bargaining team is the Chief Human Resources Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Equity Officer, with the addition of the Chief Schools Officer, which is outlined in Parameter 3. Also, we will have a licensed court reporter or stenographer to transcribe the negotiation sessions, and a transcript will be made available to the district, including board members and the members of the union bargaining team as outlined in Parameter 2. In the interest of promoting candid and open discussions during the negotiation process, the bargaining session will be closed to all except the members of the respective bargaining teams. The timeline reflects the intention of the district and CMNEA to achieve an agreement by April 1st with a maximum of 8 meetings, limited to a maximum of 3 hours. The meeting will occur between January 1st and March 31st. The administration asks the board to approve the parameters as presented.
And those have been uploaded as of this time?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the bargaining parameters as outlined?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Willoughby.
Just I want to thank the board and thank our team and thank the CMNEA for the conversations that have happened between our lawyers to get us to this point. I did want to just say, I do have one kind of concern with how these parameters that are presented to us as the recommendation, and primarily it just comes out of the fact that, like, we've seen a culture of collaboration between our exclusive bargaining representation organization being CMNEA with our other union organization here in the district being CPS-TV. And that collaboration has come in and been seen in a variety of ways, right? That's come into being present, both giving reports in the president's report section here at board meetings when we have regular sessions. It's come into the ways that they've been supporting our students, our families, and our staff. It's come into them collaboratively working together to address equity when it comes to the district and provide thoughts and suggestions and feedback in those areas. And I feel like by not allowing there to be, and I fully recognize that we have an exclusive bargaining rep union that has been elected by the membership of our staff years ago, and that is who we bargain with, and that is who the representative is. But I do think with us closing it, not giving that opportunity for there to at least be one representative from the leadership of CMSTA really breaks away at that collaborative culture that we've been having between the two and throughout the last couple years. And that's just that's part of my concern, really. And it's not out of any disrespect to the fact that I recognize, yes, we have one union that we bargain with. And I'm not saying that a representative from CMSTA is at the bargaining table, but as someone to be able to observe, I think is important. And that's just my main concern when it comes to the recommendation tonight.
I would actually echo that. I think that there were options, and CMNEA, Noelle alluded to it in her talk. There were options that were presented that included that, and I appreciate and understand the viewpoint from CMNEA and understand why they feel how they do, and also I will just say I do think it felt misrepresented in saying that we were somehow would have been violating our policy to include them, because we were not presenting it as them as bargaining partners, but merely as observers. So I share that concern, and I also, though, do think that we have heard over the last, for me, just a few years, I think for you a little longer, for some others, concerns from both bargaining teams, both the district and the other, about concerns around things that have happened during bargaining, where maybe the conversation didn't feel as fruitful and collaborative as it could have, or concerns about the notes or things like that. And so I do appreciate the addressing those concerns in bringing in a stenographer to make sure that we have really accurate representation. I think that was going to be really great for the board as well, to make sure we have really accurate records, and in the idea that we can try to have a session that is really about working together and finding common ground and working forward for the benefit of all of our teachers, for everybody in that unit. So yeah, I appreciate that in that work that was done, and I'll just read it. But I also do share that concern, because I do think that we have a little bit of a unique situation here in Columbia with how some of our teachers are choosing for themselves to be represented in different ways.
I guess I will only say that I hope that there is continued camaraderie between the presidents of our local organizations as far as the sharing of the notes and the inclusion of all of the thoughts of the entire unit. This has been an effort and a discussion that took many months, and we're striving to create an environment that is going to be the most productive and collaborative, and like efficient, and keeping in mind that what we're doing is trying to create a situation for teachers that translates into a better achievement for students. So that's where we've landed. So,
President Waters, can I make just one comment?
Sure.
Through experience, I just wanted to respond to the notes. As someone who took notes 2 years ago, and someone who's not trained in taking notes, it's a very difficult feat when you have people speaking, and you know there's a lot going on, and then people are going back and forth, and taking verbatim notes is really difficult. And so I think as far as the accuracy, it's because you know the people who are taking the notes are not trained stenographers, and so our hope is that when we have a trained stenographer, that the notes will be, you know, even better than they have been.
thank you for saying that. And you are correct to point out that any discrepancy in the notes was certainly not intentional, and no one is saying it was. This hiring a professional stenographer is just an effort to eliminate the possibility that that something gets lost. So that's why we went that way. Any further discussion? Okay, this will be a roll call vote to approve the parameters as presented.
Mr. Willoughby,
Oh, I had to be first, didn't I? No.
Ms. Farrow,
Yes.
Ms. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Lyman,
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass,
Yes.
and Ms. Waters.
Yes. All right, the parameters have been adopted. We will move on to the consideration of 2023-24 budget amendments. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is Ms. MacArthur. Take it away.
So we have several times a year, I'll bring you budget amendments, and this is for the current school year of transfers that we've made so far this year. And so tonight, we're bringing you amendments to decrease in revenues over expenditures of $20,626 in the 2023-24 operating budget. The only item that did amend that operating budget is we allow our autonomous schools and Locust Street and Ridgeway to roll forward their unused balances from year to year, and that's in policy and per their autonomous school agreements that we filled out or completed several years ago. And so that's why we're increasing our expenditures in our operating budget by $20,696 for those items. The other items in the operating fund are net zero. Again, we're transferring $1,823,571 to the capital projects fund from various operating budgets to allow the purchase of items over $1,000 that meet the requirements of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education of capital, and any of those items that are over $1,000 are required by DESI to be purchased out of the capital projects fund. And we do give our building and department leaders the autonomy if they want to purchase something in capital and they have the money available in their operating budget to make those transfers. The largest portion of that transfer is in our technology services fund. For some of our audiovisual equipment that were over $1,000, that we're doing audiovisual upgrades in our schools. And then we're transferring $174,067 actually from our salary and benefits to service and supplies, because we have some SLP positions that haven't been filled, and obviously we have to be able to meet the needs of anything that has prescribed services in our IEPs for our students. And so we're contracting, you've seen some of those contracts for SLP, for contracted services that you guys approved earlier this fall. And so we did move the budget out of salaries and benefits into the service and supply line to be able to pay those for those contracted services. And then on the capital project side, you can see our revenues is a decrease of $6,004,500, and this is a decrease in our revenues for our ESSER 3 funds by that $6 million, and that's based on projected amounts to be expended and reimbursed in the current year. This is largely due to timing of the full amount of the projects were budgeted in the current year, but some of those were paid in June prior to the previous fiscal year end, and so because those revenues and expenditures had happened in the previous fiscal year, we're decreasing the budgets for both revenues and expenditures in the current year. And then on the expenditure side for our capital projects, again, those transfers totaling $1,823,571 from the operating fund. And then we also had various transfers totaling $35,325 that are coming from student activity and donations accounts. Again, our buildings and departments do have the ability, if they have those money in ECA or donations accounts, to make those transfers to capital, make those purchases. And then the same decrease in our expenditures for our ESSER projects as we saw in our revenues, and then an increase in $1,132,977 from the 22-23 due to the timing of payments and close out those projects in the current fiscal year. And then the last two lines as the opposite side of our grants and donations account, various transfers totaling $28,957 from our grants to capital projects, and then $6,368 from our student activity funds to our capital projects. Any questions?
Seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and vote. There's been a motion and a second.
Mr. Lyman,
Yes.
Ms. Hayes, Ms. Farrow,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby,
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass,
Yes.
Ms. Waters.
Yes. Okay, the budget amendments have been passed. We'll move on to the report of the auditor and the acceptance of the audit statement. So I guess, is there a motion to approve the report of the auditor and accept the audit and the financial statement for the 22-23 school year?
So moved.
So we have a guest here who has been waiting patiently for us all night. So Ms. Gina Cochran from KEB, our independent auditors, is here to go over the presentation of our audit report for the year ended June 30, 2023.
Probably all heard me back there and coughing. I'm sorry about that. So my name is Gina Cochran. I'm a partner with KEB in the St. Louis office. Allison Weems, actually the manager on the engagement, met with the finance committee last week to go over the financial statements and the report. So I'm just going to take you over high level our summary here for the June 30th of 2023 audit. So Heather, you going to flip through as I go through? Okay, so management is responsible for preparing the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and for the design implementation of internal controls underlying those financial statements. The accrual basis of accounting is used for your governmental-wide financial statements, and the modified accrual basis is used for the fund financial statements. Our responsibility as auditors is to express an opinion on those financial statements and their fair presentation. So your audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, governmental auditing standards, and then we also perform a uniform guidance audit or a single audit. And we issued an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. That's best of 3 opinions that we can issue, so that's what you're looking for. And in terms of the financial statements, there were no material weaknesses noted over your internal controls and no non-compliance related to laws, regulations, contracts, and grants material to your financials. Related to the federal awards, that single audit under uniform guidance, the federal programs tested included the Education Stabilization Fund, the Special Education Cluster, Child Nutrition Cluster, and then the Career and Technical Education, or Perkins. We also issued an unmodified opinion on the compliance over those major programs, and no material weaknesses were noted in our audit procedures. And also no findings disclosed that required to be reported under uniform guidance. So all positives there for you. We also, in terms of your state compliance, look at Missouri laws and regulations regarding budgetary and disbursement procedures, and then also your attendance and transportation. Those attestation standards are established by the AICPA, and we also issued an unmodified opinion on that report. Now I'm going to go over just some general other communications that are included in the report to the board. So everyone should have received that also. The significant accounting policies are in note 1 to your financial statements. As I mentioned, the accrual basis of accounting for the district-wide financials and the modified accrual for the fund financial statements. There were no new accounting policies adopted, and the applications of those policies did not change this year. You have significant estimates in your financial statements related to the net pension liability and your other post-employee benefit liability. Those are in the government-wide and the proprietary fund statements, and those are actuarially determined based on GASB statements. No transactions lacked authoritative guidance or consensus, and we have complied with ethical requirements related to our independence. Otherwise, we would not be able to issue an independent auditor's report on your financial statements. Your financial statements are neutral, consistent, and clear. That means when you're looking at this year's report compared to last year's, you're comparing apples to apples. Nothing changed there. There were no difficulties encountered during our audit. No disagreements with management. Last year, we had a new requirement that required us to disclose significant risks related to audits that we had to consider. The only one we have again this year is the management override of controls. That is a required risk by our professional standards on all audit engagements. So there's no action to be taken by the board or by management related to that risk in your audit. It just means we do a lot more procedures in terms of revenue and the related receivables over those. We had no uncorrected misstatements this year as a result of our audit, and we did have one corrected misstatement that was reported in the report to the board related to recording some sales tax revenues that were not recorded at year end. Management also provided us with a representation letter related to the audit, that just meaning that the financials were complete and accurate, and all of the information in the disclosures were also complete and accurate. And everything was disclosed to us as auditors. To our knowledge, there was no consultation with other independent accountants. That's typically only the case if there's a new standard or a big issue in your financial statements. Management might not agree with us, so they might reach out to another accounting firm. So we did not have that this year. And that wraps it up. So other than that, just appreciation to Heather, Jim, Brian, and Matt, and all the other district employees for all the help with the audit, and for the board, obviously, for continuing to engage with KEB for your audit. Any questions overall on the presentation?
Let's question, well, here's one question that comes into it, and the next one's just a statement. The managerial override of controls. That is something that is just simply, basically y'all stating, y'all control your budget. Y'all could decide to do whatever you want with it, just like how anybody who controls their budget could do that, and that is an inherent risk of just being human.
Yeah, absolutely correct. So budget, also expenditures and recording information through the general ledger. There's controls in place for a reason that management establishes and the board oversees and is still responsible for those controls that are in place and kind of understanding that. So just because management has the ability to exercise control, they can manipulate those controls. Even if we all think those controls are in place, it's a potential in any organization. And it typically requires collusion of more than 2 people to have that control overridden.
And highlighting it to us is not that y'all found it
Absolutely
to be occurring.
not. It's required.
And then the other one I wanted for it to be restated to, because you've already said it very clearly, but just to catch everyone's eye, if they look at the slide, the one correction on the misstatement when it came to those taxes was primarily just due to the fact of timing purposes of when the money came in and staff getting everything done and getting it put in and when those documents got to you. So that was just a small error. Not numbers were correct and all that stuff. Once it got corrected, it just was missing due to timing.
Correct. Yeah, we identified and management agreed that it needed to be recorded. Anything else?
I don't think so, but I'm sure you guys all got this report. It's like my second favorite document after our 400-page budget is our 150-page annual comprehensive financial report. And so, and if you did any reading in this weekend, I know most of you picked yours up on Friday, but this is the report that our business office and Jim and his team put together that has all of our financial statements, but also has a lot of other information. If you don't read anything else in the report, it is a 5-section report, but then the beginning of the financial section is what's called the management's discussion and analysis, and that's like a more narrative and graphical and chart-based section that explains like fluctuations between last year and this year in our financial statement numbers. And so if you want to read 13 pages instead of 150, that's what I would suggest.
Good snapshot.
Yes, and then there's also a lot of statistical information in the back of the book as well. There's a statistical section as well as the reports over state compliance and the federal section in the very back. But yeah, it's a long process from the end of the fiscal year, and so they've been working hard, and my team works hard with our audit team and to pull together these financial statements in this report and get through the audit, and so we really appreciate that.
Sorry. I also wanted to add, we're one of a few handful of school districts that do a comprehensive annual audit, and we've been doing that for quite some time and years. And then, if you wouldn't mind, because you shared it in finance, that book that is there with the audit, that is all compiled and created by our finance department.
100% yes. The only thing we really add to that, other than reviewing and tick and tying and making sure everything agrees to our audit, is our audit opinions. So.
Yep. And that was long before I was ever here. I think we're in the 30 plus years that we've received an award for this annual comprehensive financial report. And so it's really a dedicated team that really pulls together. And there, again, like there's only a handful of school districts in the state of Missouri that receive awards and do what we call an ACFR, annual comprehensive financial report.
Go finance team. I think that's wonderful. And I think it helps to inspire confidence in the community that we are managing taxpayers' money well and that we're being fiscally responsible. So we appreciate that. That makes the board's job easier to know that we have a CFO and a business department and an auditor that are all managing our, keeping up on our finances very well. Thank you all. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the report or accept the audit. This will be a roll call vote. Mic's on, everybody.
Okay. Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Ms. Farrow?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Ms. Waters?
Yes. Okay, the Audit report has been approved and accepted. Thank you very much,
Thank
Gina.
you.
And thank you for being here so late. The last thing we need to get to is the consideration of construction agreements, engagements, and change orders. Is there a motion to approve those?
I move to approve the construction agreements, engagements, and change orders as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Does anyone have any questions? All right.
Short list here tonight.
It is a short list. It's good. All right. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Mike's on.
Ms. Farrow?
Yes.
Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Ms. Waters?
Yes. Okay, don't look now. It's only 10:02. We've finished the bulk of our meeting. As far as board member announcements, Mr. Harper will be on the radio tomorrow at 8:30. You know this, right, Mr. Harper?
I don't have the call-in number yet, but yes, I am aware.
Okay.
I assume.
It should be on a calendar invite from Ms. Fiore, I think.
Okay.
And then by way of other announcements, we have a candidate workshop on Thursday. Mr. Willoughby and Mr. Lyman are going to be talking about what it means to be on the board, what's involved, what our role is. We hope that anyone who's interested in taking this seat when Ms. Hayes leaves it against our will will come and learn more about that. That's going to be this Thursday in here at 6 o'clock. It should last about an hour. Anything else?
I believe Paul's the board responder until the 17th, and then someone's taking over for you, Paul. Is that correct? Jean will be taking over for Paul, just to let the public know who they might get a response from during the month.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Could I just?
Sorry. Did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say to all of our kids, families, and staff, have a wonderful winter break. We hope you enjoy that time with family and friends, and we look forward to seeing y'all back in January.
That's pretty relevant. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, also happy holidays at 10 o'clock. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
That looks unanimous to me.
I voted.